Chapter 801. After reaching a certain height, one's perspective and way of thinking would change to a certain extent. He was no longer the little disciple who was struggling to survive in the cultivation world. Back then, he naturally wanted his territory to be as big and powerful as possible, and his ambition was extremely exuberant. But now, he was already standing at the peak of the cultivation world, and the entire world was under his observation. Was there any meaning in fighting with the people of the world? He could more or less understand by Changchun's thoughts. After reaching a certain height, the only thing worth looking up at was a higher place. Thinking back to how childish it was to ask Shi Wenguang to help him conquer the world, now that the entire world was under his feet, what was there to fight for? There was no point. In a small town that could not be considered prosperous, in a house that had been freshly painted, in the living room, Yu Changgui and Shui Ernyang, who were still in good spirits, were talking to Chu Ping-er. Chu Ping-er had a bashful look on her face, while Bai Suzhen smiled and did not say anything. In the courtyard, Yu Qianqiu looked at Yu Wuqiu, who had turned from a child to a tall young man, and sighed. He felt that he owed this family too much. He continuously told Yu Wuqiu about some things. Yu Wuqiu was also filled with admiration towards this elder brother of his. Even though he rarely met his elder brother, after living in Utopia for so many years, he naturally knew how amazing his elder brother was. Ordinary people could not compare to him at all. By now, Yu Qianqiu had thought things through. He could not protect this family forever. They were people from different worlds, and they should have their own lives. Just like how Bai Changchun treated the four great families, they still had to walk their own paths. As a result, Yu Qianqiu spent a great deal of effort to find a simple and honest town, bought a house, and brought his family out. It was obvious that Yu Changgui and Shui Ernyang were very happy about this. Originally, Yu Changgui wanted to bring his family back to Swallow City. However, Yu Qianqiu considered that he had caused too much of a ruckus in Swallow City back then. Everyone in the cultivation world knew that he was from there. If his family returned, they would inevitably attract the covetous eyes of those with ill intentions. After some persuasion, Yu Changgui finally agreed to go to a strange place and start a new life with his family. When the time was right, he would return to his family. The family had told each other everything that needed to be said. Yu Qianqiu led Bai Suzhen and Chu Ping-er to bid farewell to the rest of the family and left. In Utopia's ethereal palace, Chu Ping-er, who had finally met Yu Qianqiu, naturally wouldn't let him off. In the room that was filled with the light of spring, King Xiang met the goddess. The two of them had a great battle that lasted for a long time. After that, the two of them were affectionate for an entire day. When Chu Ping-er fell asleep from exhaustion after a few battles, Yu Qianqiu sneaked out of the room. There was no other reason. Previously, Bai Suzhen had hinted to him that she had something to look for him. However, she was dragged away by Chu Ping-er to do strenuous exercises. In the darkness of the night, Yu Qianqiu arrived at the cliff outside Ethereal Palace. Bai Suzhen, who was dressed in white, was waiting for him there. The two of them stood side by side, enduring the gentle chill of the night wind. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and asked, "What's the matter?" Bai Suzhen smiled faintly and took out a sword from her storage bag. She handed it over and said, "I've already deciphered the array formation inside." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He took the sword and took a look. It was the Green Destiny sword that he had gotten from Ong Kwangsung back then. Caressing the ice-cold body of the sword, Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. If it was in the past, this sword would have been a good item to him. But now, it was really of little value. With a dang sound, Yu Qianqiu flicked the sword with his fingers and let out a crisp sound. He raised the sword and sighed. This sword originally belonged to your Fox clan. Back then, Xiaoshui had abandoned it. Now that it has landed in your hands, it can be considered as returning to its rightful owner. Bai Suzhen understood the meaning behind his words and asked in surprise, "You don't want it anymore?" Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said, "I won't hide it from you. I no longer have a use for this item. I have a better one." As he spoke, he took her hand and stuffed it into her hand. He chuckled and said, "I can't let you work hard for nothing. I'll give it to you." Bai Suzhen stared at the sword in her hand in a daze. Yu Qianqiu immediately asked anxiously. What's wrong? Are you unhappy? Bai Suzhen shook her head silently and bit her lips. Since you don't need it anymore, I think. I want to send it back to my fox clan. Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief and said with a smile. No problem. You can decide what's yours. When do you want to leave? I'll send you there. How about now? After hesitating for a while, Bai Suzhen shook her head again. It was unknown what she was worried about. Yu Qianqiu paused and did not force her. He said with a smile. When you want to go back, just tell me. I can accompany you anytime. Bai Suzhen nodded with a gloomy expression. She suddenly raised her head and said, There's something else I need to tell you. Heh. If you have something to say, just say it, said Yu Qianqiu with a smile. Bai Suzhen said slowly, You know about Xiao Wanqing and Chen Feng's son. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, I know. You're talking about that kid, Chen Shua. He can already run around in Utopia. I even gave him a gift. What's wrong with him? Bai Suzhen said with a serious expression. Xiao Wanqing looked for me a few times. She wanted to bring her son out. She said that she wanted him to live like an ordinary person. But I rejected her and said that I'll wait for you to come back before making a decision. Yu Qianqiu's brows twitched slightly. He said in a low voice, What does Chen Feng mean? Bai Suzhen shook her head and said, Chen Feng never said anything. Tell her that I know about this. When I'm done with the matters outside, I'll personally send them out. Yu Qianqiu said as he looked around Utopia under the night sky. He sighed and said, Someone's heart is unstable. Looks like I've done something that I shouldn't have. Return everyone's natal primordial spirits to them. Bai Suzhen looked around and said in surprise, Is it safe to do this? Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, I don't need to use this method anymore. Return them to them. Forcefully controlling them isn't a long-term solution. The sooner we discover the problem, the sooner we can solve it. Bai Suzhen stared at him silently for a while. She nodded slowly and said, I understand what you mean. The two of them stood quietly for a while. A tired expression appeared on Yu Qianqiu's face. He turned around and said with a faint smile, You can go back first. I want to be alone for a while. Bai Suzhen didn't say anything else and left quietly. Yu Qianqiu stood alone at the edge of the cliff. He stood there until daybreak in the east. No one knew what he was thinking. After shaking his head slightly, he slowly closed his eyes again. The eyebrows on his calm face suddenly twitched. He suddenly opened his eyes, and there was a hint of worry in them. During this period of time, whenever he was free, he would worry about Bai Changchun's safety in the netherworld. He couldn't help but try to find Bai Changchun's location. What made him feel strange was that he could find Bai Changchun in the past, but this time, he had lost contact with Bai Changchun. Logically speaking, this was impossible. Even if something happened to Bai Changchun, the silver ball should still be there. But this time, he couldn't even sense the silver ball. What happened to the old fellow? Could something really have happened to him? The more Yu Qianqiu thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. With the old fellow's abilities, ordinary netherworld generals wouldn't be a match for him, unless he met an expert, like the Emperor of the Netherworld. Could it be that the old fellow really had a conflict with the Emperor of the Netherworld? Or did something happen to the Netherworld? He really wanted to go to the Netherworld to take a look, but he couldn't. He originally had a chance, but unfortunately, Bai Changchun didn't follow Yu Qianqiu's advice and throw out a few silver balls for no reason. He didn't have the guts to let Yu Qianqiu go through the gate of the Netherworld. He had long heard of the power of the passageway to the Netherworld. It could refine all kinds of life energy. Unless he had already forged an immortal body, he wouldn't be able to pass through it with his mortal body. Going from the immortal realm to the Netherworld, his current cultivation level hadn't reached the stage where he could reintegrate his 3 souls and 7 spirits. He still couldn't withstand the power of the passageway to the immortal realm. If he wasn't careful, his soul might scatter and he would die. Just as he was anxiously wandering around, Yu Qianqiu's eyes suddenly lit up. He clapped his hands and said, Old monster, how could I have forgotten about him? He suddenly remembered the silver ball he had given to Immortal Lord Crocodile. Hadn't Immortal Lord Crocodile gone to the Netherworld? He immediately stood on the cliff and closed his eyes to sense Immortal Lord Crocodile's location. After a while, Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes and exclaimed in surprise. He had indeed sensed the silver ball he had given to immortal Lord Crocodile. But the spatial location didn't seem to be the one by Changchun was in the netherworld. Could it be that the old monster had really returned to the immortal realm? Yu Qianqiu rubbed his chin, and his eyes darted around. He was indeed a little tempted, and was considering whether to go to the immortal realm. In the end, he felt that he should first fuse with the true Samadhi fire. Otherwise he would be like an ant in the immortal realm, where there were many strong cultivators. Having the true Samadhi fire would be good for self-defense. After making up his mind, he immediately returned to Obedient Island. For the next half a month, Yu Qianqiu had been cooped up in the big house on Obedient Island, thinking of ways to fuse with the true Samadhi fire. Lady Mu didn't disturb him. However, sadly, he found that although the three flames could be mixed together, it was still far from the so-called fusion. With his current cultivation, he couldn't fuse the three flames into one. He couldn't help but think of immortal Lord Crocodile's words. Indeed, it was difficult to fuse them without sufficient cultivation. But if it was really as immortal Lord Crocodile had said, and he had to be an immortal emperor to fuse them, then he would have to wait until he could cultivate the true Samadhi fire. On this day, Yu Qianqiu, who had been in seclusion for a whole month, finally walked out of the big house. With his hands behind his back, he walked around Obedient Island again and again. Since he hadn't succeeded in fusing with the true Samadhi fire, he was now considering whether he should take the risk and go to the immortal realm. Lady Mu watched him silently, not daring to disturb him. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu, who had his head buried in his hands, suddenly clapped his hands and said, "Let's go, I'm not afraid." With that, he disappeared from the 1,000-mile lake. Chapter 802. In the tranquil valley, there was lush greenery everywhere. All kinds of unknown wildflowers bloomed beautifully, and chickadees flew and landed happily among the vegetation. The fresh air was refreshing. Yu Qianqiu, who suddenly appeared in the valley, was on guard at first, then gradually relaxed. He looked around in shock. This was the celestial realm? It seemed no different from the human world. However, after taking a few steps, he felt the difference. The spirit qi in the air here was obviously richer than in the human world. Yu Qianqiu frowned as he stared at a big tree on the slope of the valley. There was a bird's nest on it. He looked around and leaped onto the big tree in a flash. He poked his head inside, and was immediately startled by the chirping of birds. He saw 7 or 8 little birds waiting to be fed. Their eyes had yet to open, and their feathers were not fully grown yet. They were all squawking. They probably thought Yu Qianqiu was their mother, who was out looking for food. Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. He reached out and pushed the birds away from the nest. There was a small silver ball lying inside. King old monster. I told you to find a beautiful place to throw it, but I didn't tell you to throw it in a bird's nest. Yu Qianqiu muttered for a while. He was about to leave with the small silver ball, when he suddenly paused. He realized that it was quite hidden in the bird's nest, so he threw it back into the bird's nest. He did not remember how he had scolded immortal Lord Crocodile. What he did not know was that immortal Lord Crocodile did as he said, and threw the silver ball in a beautiful place. But immortal Lord Crocodile did not expect a bird to like things that glowed. It ended up bringing the silver ball to its nest. After leaving the big tree, he flew to the opposite valley and looked around. There was a towering stone mountain not far from the valley. There were many buildings at the foot of the mountain, and many people were gathered there. Some were even flying there. Yu Qianqiu was considering whether to go over and take a look when he suddenly saw someone flying past him. He was slightly surprised to find that the person was only in the early stage of soul formation. He gritted his teeth and flew over. When they got there, they discovered that it was similar to a trade center. There were shops selling things everywhere. After taking a few glances, he realized that the shop was filled with a dazzling array of items, and he basically didn't recognize any of them. Yu Qianqiu looked around and realized that no one was paying attention to this foreign visitor. He looked ahead and saw a group of people gathered under a large flag. Most of them were soul formation cultivators, and there were even tribulation transcendence cultivators. There weren't many people whose cultivation he couldn't see through. Now he was relieved, and he followed the people passing by to join in the fun, wanting to see what was going on. However, the people in front of him were too crowded, and he couldn't squeeze through at all. He wanted to fly up and take a look, but no one else did so. If he did, it would be too conspicuous. Just as he was about to use brute force to force his way through, he suddenly heard someone shouting from inside. Who else? I. Excited voices came from the crowd, and they all raised their hands. Yu Qianqiu looked around. Although he didn't know what was going on, he didn't want to stand out too much. He immediately raised his hand. No matter what, he had to say, I first. He raised his hand, and his head swayed left and right. He couldn't see clearly what was going on inside. Because he was too engrossed, the others had already put their hands down. But he still raised his hand, and peeked into the gaps of the necks in front of him. The person standing behind him couldn't stand it anymore. He immediately patted his shoulder. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand, and suddenly turned around. He said warily, What are you trying to do? The person was startled. He pointed at his raised hand, and then pointed around. Brother, put it down. Yu Qianqiu looked around and immediately withdrew his hand. Fortunately, no one's attention was on him. With someone talking, Yu Qianqiu immediately stuck to him. He smiled. May I ask what's going on inside, brother? As he spoke, he began to size up the person. This was an ordinary-looking middle-aged man wearing a gray robe. There was nothing special about him, but his cultivation was at the final stage of the soul formation stage. The person was startled again. You don't know what's going on? Then why did you raise your hand? Yu Qianqiu laughed and explained, It's precisely because I don't know that I raised my hand to see what's going on. The person was speechless. He shook his head. The Bada Chamber of Commerce is recruiting. Recruiting? What does the Bada Chamber of Commerce do? What kind of people are they recruiting? Yu Qianqiu turned around and asked curiously. The person was instantly dumbfounded. There were also a few surprised gazes from the side. The person didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The Bada Chamber of Commerce has a pass to do business in the netherworld. They are recruiting people to do business in the netherworld. People like us can earn a lot of spirit stones just by following the Bada Chamber of Commerce to the netherworld. Isn't that why you're here? To the netherworld? Yu Qianqiu's eyes instantly lit up. Wasn't this exactly what he wanted? Suddenly his gaze paused. Behind the crowd in front of him, there was a burly man carrying a flag. The words Sitong were embroidered on it. The tall and sturdy man stuck the flagpole down and shouted, Recruiting! Me! Yu Qianqiu shouted energetically, and raised his hand high up. The person who was talking to him didn't know what was going on. He also raised his hand without hesitation and shouted, Me! But when he turned around, he was instantly dumbfounded. The crowd of onlookers also didn't know what was going on behind them. However, when they heard someone shouting recruiting, and then someone shouting me impatiently, many people immediately raised their hands and shouted, Me! When they turned around, they were all dumbfounded. The burly man holding the Sitong flag was also stunned. He didn't think that so many people would come to sign up for Sitong today. The previous few times, there wasn't even a single person signing up. He immediately pointed at the people who had raised their hands and laughed. You. And you, the Chamber of Commerce has the same rules. Since you've signed up, you can't go back on your word. Otherwise, don't blame me, Nan Tianlong, for being impolite. Haha. Those who raised their hands, come over here. The person who was talking to Yu Qianqiu slowly turned around. With a twisted face, he stared at Yu Qianqiu and said word by word, Who told you to shout? Because of this sentence, those who had raised their hands immediately found the culprit. Their murderous gazes all focused on Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt a huge pressure. He looked around and asked weakly, Is there a problem? Cut the crap. All of you come over here and follow me. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. The burly man carried the flag on his shoulder and waved his arm at them while laughing. The group of people looked as if their parents had died. They reluctantly followed him. The burly man carrying the flag kept urging them. Those who didn't raise their hands at the back burst into wild laughter. They laughed so hard that they beat their feet and stomped their chests. Yu Qianqiu was mixed in the dozens of moving people. He was a little shocked. What trouble did he get into? He asked the person who had spoken to him earlier. Unfortunately, that person ignored him. The group of people was led by the burly man through 2 streets. They arrived in front of a large restaurant with a golden signboard that said Sitong. The guard at the door immediately ran over to take the flag from the burly man. He looked at the group of people who had followed him and asked, Nan Tianlong, who are these people? The burly man called Nan Tianlong laughed. Of course they're the people we recruited. 37 people. Just a moment is enough. There's no need to trouble yourself anymore. The guard was at a loss for words. His face was full of disbelief. Nan Tianlong waved his hand at the crowd. What are you waiting for? Come in with me. The group of people followed him in. They were led to a large field in the side courtyard. The field was not small. The surrounding flower beds were also very lush. It looked like a large business. However, there were not many people around. It seemed a little deserted. All of you stay here obediently. If anyone dares to run, you can try it. Nan Tianlong threw down this sentence and went to the back courtyard. At this moment, everyone's eyes were on Yu Qianqiu. Someone sneered. There's no need to say anything. This person must be an agent of the Sitong Chamber of Commerce. He purposely tricked us. Yu Qianqiu was holding back a stomach full of grievances. He didn't know what was going on. When he heard someone mocking him, he immediately looked over. It was only a mid-stage soul formation cultivator. He immediately became furious. Bastard, you must be tired of living. Say it again if you have the ability. Since he dared to say such harsh words, everyone immediately checked his cultivation. In the end, no one could see through his cultivation. Everyone immediately became more obedient and didn't dare to look at him with disgust. The person who spoke to Yu Qianqiu before cupped his hands. I am Tao Zhong. Looking at your cultivation, you should be an immortal cultivator, right? With your cultivation, you could do anything. Why did you come to this business? I am Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu also cupped his hands. I really don't know what is going on. Brother Tao, please tell me in detail, so I know what kind of trouble I've caused. Everyone had a look of disbelief when they heard this. Tao Zhong looked at him doubtfully, but he still roughly explained the cause of the matter. It turned out that the Sitong Chamber of Commerce and the Bada Chamber of Commerce were business rivals. They once fought over a permit to do business in the Netherworld. In the end, the permit fell into the hands of the Bada Chamber of Commerce. It should be known that doing business with the Netherworld was very profitable. As a result, the Bada Chamber of Commerce quickly expanded. Although the Sitong Chamber of Commerce later obtained a permit to do business with the Netherworld at all costs, because the Bada Chamber of Commerce took the initiative and kept suppressing the Sitong Chamber of Commerce, it made the Sitong Chamber of Commerce unable to purchase the items needed by the Netherworld. Over the years, the Sitong Chamber of Commerce had been forced to the point of collapse by the Bada Chamber of Commerce. However, this time, the Sitong Chamber of Commerce encountered a once-in-a-100-years opportunity to turn things around. The Divine Ruin Realm, that opened once every 100 years, was about to open. As long as one was lucky, one could collect many rare treasures needed by the Netherworld and the Immortal Realm. As long as the Chamber of Commerce that had the qualifications to do business with the Netherworld paid enough money, they could enter the Divine Ruin Realm with other sects that paid to try their luck. Chapter 803. It was true that Sitong had a past to trade with the Netherworld, but the current Sitong had fallen to the point where he could not take out the money to enter the Divine Ruin Realm. This sum of money was not a small sum, no less than 50 million Divine Great Spirit Stones. However, the pass in Sitong's hand was still very valuable. Sitong also understood that if he did not seize this opportunity to turn things around, that pass would be useless. Hence, he gritted his teeth and borrowed 50 million Divine Great Spirit Stones. If he could not return it on time, he would have to use that pass as compensation. Even though he had collected enough money, there was still a relatively harsh restriction to enter the Divine Ruin Realm. That was, each family could only send 30 people at most, and these 30 people's cultivation could only be below the Immortal Realm. Those who had reached the Immortal Realm were not allowed to participate. With so many chambers of commerce and sects participating at the same time, And in a different world, fighting for treasures was inevitable. Those who were able to risk their lives for the various sects and chambers of commerce were naturally the disciples of the main family. Outsiders would not take this risk for you. In this way the problem arose. Sitong had long fallen, and the disciples under him had either died, scattered or left. Although he still held the name of a chamber of commerce, the total number of people added up to less than 5. Thus, the scene of Sitong recruiting appeared. Sitong had been recruiting for more than half a month, but not a single person had come. Because even if one could return from the divine ruin realm alive, if you helped Sitong, Bada would not let you off. Who would do such a strenuous, unrewarding and life-threatening thing? If not for the rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, Sitong would have been destroyed by Bada long ago. Seeing that the divine ruin realm would open in 3 days, some chambers of commerce and sects had already begun to gather outside the divine ruin realm, but Sitong still had not recruited a single person. With Tao Zhong's words, Yu Qianqiu nodded his head, indicating that he understood. Speaking of this divine ruin realm, Yu Qianqiu more or less had some understanding. Back when he was chatting with Huang Tian in the Eastern Holy Land's Yellow Earth City, he had heard Huang Tian mention it. This divine ruin realm was said to be a cultivation land opened by the ancient god, but for some reason, it was abandoned by the ancient god. The spiritual energy inside was very abundant, and it was rich in all kinds of treasures. However, it was also extremely dangerous inside, with all kinds of ferocious beasts. According to Huang Tian, the divine ruin realm would only open once every 100 years. After 3 months, it would close and only open again in the next 100 years. However, Huang Tian did not mention anything about the various sects participating in the opening of the divine ruin realm. As Yu Qianqiu was thinking about this, he suddenly frowned and asked everyone, "Then why are all of you rushing to register at Bada? It seems like you really don't know anything." Tao Zhong smiled bitterly and said, "The reason why we are rushing to register with Bada is not to enter the divine ruin realm, but to help Bada do business in the netherworld. Every time he successfully completed a transaction, he would be rewarded with 10 top-grade spirit stones. Although the chances of us accepting the Bada Chamber of Commerce's employment are slim, we'll be out of luck if you coax us like this. What's there to be unlucky about? Since no one wants to go, it's fine if they don't go. They can't possibly kidnap you into the divine ruin realm or kill you, right?" Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly. The group of people immediately revealed exaggerated expressions of speechlessness. Tao Zhong did not know whether to laugh or cry as he said, "No matter how much Sitong has declined, they are still a member of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. The Chamber of Commerce Alliance pays attention to credibility. When dealing with the Chamber of Commerce, one must value credibility. Once they agree, they cannot go back on their word. Otherwise, even if Sitong does not do anything to us, the Chamber of Commerce Alliance will not let us off. If the Chamber of Commerce Alliance wants to kill someone, how many people in the entire immortal world can escape? Oh my god, don't tell me you don't even know this?" Yu Qianqiu touched his nose awkwardly and said, "That seems to be the case, I almost forgot." Only now did he understand that he had indeed brought a lot of trouble to these guys. Although he was not afraid, it did not mean that others had the capital to not be afraid. At this moment, 3 people came out of the backyard. 2 men and a woman stood in front of everyone. Among them, Nan Tianlong introduced them to everyone. "This is our association's president, this is the young lady." Yu Qianqiu quickly scanned through their cultivation. Apart from the young lady who was at the soul formation final stage, he couldn't see through the president and Nan Tianlong's cultivation. It was clear that they had reached the immortal realm. The president looked like an outstanding person. No wonder his daughter was not bad. Yu Qianqiu could not help but take a few more looks at the president's daughter, who was biting her lips and not saying a word. Other than her petite figure, everything else about her was not bad. When everyone saw the president of Sitong appear, no one actually spoke to him. Clearly, they were not very interested in Sitong. The president's face showed a trace of bitterness. He waved his hand at Nan Tianlong and said, "Sitong is already like this. The president will not grow up, so don't mention it." Then he cupped his hands at everyone and said with a warm smile, "This humble one is Mu Bing. This is my daughter Mu Tianjiao. Thank you everyone for coming to support Si Tong at this crucial time. As long as Si Tong can get through this crisis, I will definitely remember everyone's great kindness." Someone in the crowd immediately muttered in a low voice, "Do you think we wanted to support you? If we weren't forced." Although the voice was soft, with everyone's cultivation, how could they not hear it? Mu Bing suddenly turned around and shouted, "Tianlong, what's going on? Could it be that you forced them to come? Have you forgotten the rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance that we cannot force anyone to buy or sell?" Nan Tianlong hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Master, it's not like that. They took the initiative to come." Mu Bing frowned slightly. His disciple would definitely not lie to him. He slowly turned around, and his gaze swept across the crowd. "What exactly is going on? Is there anyone who is willing to tell me the details? I'd rather watch the four links collapse than do something like forcing people to buy and sell." Everyone looked at each other. In the end, Tao Zhong stood up and cupped his hands at Mu Bing. "President Mu, this can't be considered as a forced purchase. It's actually a misunderstanding." He pointed at Yu Qianqiu and explained the misunderstanding, causing Yu Qianqiu to feel quite embarrassed. After Mu Bing understood the situation, he was silent for a long time. This was a difficult decision for Si Tong at this crucial time. After all, it wasn't Si Tong's fault. It was reasonable no matter where it went. Why not just try to be clever and make things worse? Si Tong will not force anyone. Mu Bing finally said this. Nan Tianlong's expression changed slightly. He wanted to say something but stopped himself. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Yu Qianqiu also secretly shook his head. No wonder Si Tong's business was like this. There was no such thing as a business without evil. Everyone was about to bid their farewells when Mu Tianjiao suddenly stepped forward and said, "But rules are rules. I, Si Tong, did not force you. You were the ones who took the initiative to join us. So how can you go back on your word? Do you really think the rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance are just for show?" Everyone's eyes focused on Mu Bing. Mu Bing frowned and said, "Tianjiao." Mu Tianjiao's delicate face flashed with stubbornness. She immediately cupped her hands and interrupted. "Father, we also have to abide by the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's rules. If we let them go, what if someone comes to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance and accuses us of going back on our word and not hiring them? I'm afraid we won't even be able to find someone to testify for us. This is a critical time. We have to be on guard against thieves and rascals." Mu Bing was speechless. Nan Tianlong also immediately cupped his hands and said, "Master, Junior sister is right. We need to be on guard against thieves and rascals." Mu Tianjiao took this opportunity to announce loudly, "As long as everyone here accepts my, Si Tong's employment, I, Si Tong, am willing to take out 1/10 of the estimated value of the treasures obtained in the Divine Ruin realm." The moment these words were spoken, a commotion broke out among the crowd. This temptation was too great. One had to know that in order to enter the Divine Ruin realm, the various chambers of commerce were willing to pay 50 million divine-grade spirit stones. Under normal circumstances, they would be able to get double the return. In other words, the estimated value of the treasures obtained was at least 100 million divine-grade spirit stones. 1/10 of 100 million divine-grade spirit stones was equivalent to 10 million divine-grade spirit stones. If this sum of money was divided among the people here, each person would receive roughly 300,000 divine-grade spirit stones. Compared to the 10 top-grade spirit stones they would receive in a single trip to the netherworld, it was an astronomical figure. Not to mention, the trip to the netherworld was not entirely smooth sailing. There were still dangers. Nan Tianlong sneaked a peek at his master, seeing that his junior sister was willing to take out such a large amount of benefits without asking for his master's permission. But he found that his master was deep in thought. Seeing that many people were tempted, Mu Tianjiao continued, "Of course I, Si Tong, will not force everyone. I will still give everyone a choice. Those who do not want to accept my, Si Tong's employment, can leave a statement before you leave. Those who stay, I will also give you a guarantee, in case something happens that cannot be explained clearly. Whether you want to stay or leave, it's up to you. This time, everyone was stumped. Stay. It was too dangerous. Don't stay. 300,000 divine great spirit stones. Where would they find such a fat profit? This was money that they might not be able to earn even if they worked their whole lives. Indeed, profit and risk coexisted. This made it difficult for everyone to choose. Yu Qianqiu did not consider this. He was not short of money. Instead, he was sizing up Mu Tianjiao, noticing that this girl was indeed bolder than her father, using both kindness and authority, a person who could make decisions. After everyone made their choice, 9 out of the 37 people left. These were all people with families, and they were worried that their families would suffer retaliation from the 8 pagoda trading firm. So they chose to leave. The others threw caution to the wind for the sake of 300,000 divine grade spirit stones. As long as they got the money, they would immediately run as far as they could, prepared to never meet the 8 pagoda trading firm again. Yu Qianqiu did not leave either, receiving a jade archive from Mu Tianjiao. Inside it was a guarantee from Si Tong, written personally by her. The general idea was that after entering the Divine Ruin realm, they were willing to split 1/10 of the estimated value of the treasures they obtained equally with those who accepted Si Tong's employment. It was not that he wanted to earn this money, but that even if he left, he might not be able to find an opportunity to go to the netherworld immediately. Accepting this employment could also take the opportunity to inquire about more useful information. Not to mention, he also wanted to see what was going on inside the Divine Ruin realm. If he found something amiss after entering, he could just leave at any time. There was nothing to worry about. Chapter 804. 9 out of the 37 people had left, leaving 28 people behind. The number of people who could enter the Divine Ruin realm could not exceed 30. These people were about the same, but a few of them had slightly lower cultivation, only at the early stage of soul formation. Although there were already 28 people, 1 or 2 less people was very likely to avoid a large loss. Mu Bing sighed slightly. This was something that could not be helped. It was already good to be able to recruit so many people. If it was not for the misunderstanding caused by that person, no one would have come to the 4 links at all. Mu Bing's gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu. He really had to thank this person, but then he was stunned. He found that he could not see through this person's cultivation. He walked slowly to Yu Qianqiu's side and said in a deep voice, "Your cultivation is extraordinary. Why did you come to the declining 4 links Chamber of Commerce to have fun?" Mu Tianjiao and Nan Tianlong also discovered Yu Qianqiu's extraordinariness because of Mu Bing's actions. Yu Qianqiu was startled, then understood what the problem was. He immediately smiled and said, "President Mu, you misunderstand. I did not come to your Chamber of Commerce to have fun, but because I accidentally took a panacea that can conceal my cultivation before coming down. My actual cultivation is only at the late stage of soul formation." "Is that so?" Mu Bing's tone and the expression in his eyes were suspicious. He said in a deep voice, "In that case, is it convenient for you to let me investigate?" Yu Qianqiu shrugged indifferently and stretched out a hand. Mu Bing held Yu Qianqiu's hand with some vigilance. After a little investigation, he found that the true essence in Yu Qianqiu's body was still white, not golden immortal essence. He immediately let go of his hand and cupped his fists, saying, "Don't blame me. In fact, the cultivation to enter the Divine Ruin realm can only be below the immortal realm. If you don't figure it out, even if you reach the Divine Ruin realm, you won't be able to enter. Please forgive me for offending you." Mu Tianjiao and Nan Tianlong breathed a sigh of relief. Mu Bing's words clearly proved that the other party was not lying. His cultivation was indeed at the soul formation stage. The two of them couldn't help but worry. Now 1 less person was a loss. Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Chairman Mu, you're too polite. This is what I should do. If it were me, I would do the same." Mu Bing smiled and nodded, then walked back to stand with Mu Tianjiao and Nan Tianlong. On the surface, they did not say a word, but everyone knew that this family must be secretly discussing something through voice transmission. Yu Qianqiu carefully observed their expressions, and suddenly discovered that Mu Bing and Mu Tianjiao seemed to be a little agitated. The father and daughter seemed to have had some kind of argument, but in the end, it seemed that Mu Bing had compromised. However, his expression was not very good. Then, Mu Bing walked over and cupped his hands to everyone. Everyone, I'm sorry. I should have let everyone have a good rest first. But the Divine Ruin Realm will open in 3 days. Due to travel issues, we have no choice but to set off immediately. Please be magnanimous and forgive us. As for whether they should rest or not, no one really had any opinion. Tao Zhong took the lead and cupped his hands. Chairman Mu, you're too polite. This is what we should do. A group of people also echoed. Mu Bing no longer hesitated and quickly took out a palm-sized flying shuttle and threw it into the air. In an instant, it became a giant shuttle in the air. He waved to everyone and said, "Please." A group of people rushed up. Then the father and daughter in Nan Tianlong also flashed up. The father and daughter guarded the tail of the shuttle, while Nan Tianlong walked to the head. At this time, 2 people flashed up from the Four Links Guild Hall and saluted Mu Bing. Mu Bing smiled faintly and said, "Take good care of the family." The 2 responded in unison and retreated. Mu Bing waved to the front, and Nan Tianlong personally drove the flying shuttle away. Before leaving, Yu Qianqiu looked down and found that there were only a few people left in the huge Four Links Guild Hall. They were really down and out. The flying shuttle flew at an extremely fast speed, breaking through the clouds all the way. Yu Qianqiu looked at the rapidly retreating mountains and rivers, and was secretly shocked. This speed was much faster than the limit of his current cultivation. The celestial world was indeed the celestial world. It was extraordinary. Back when he was chatting with Huang Tian in Yellow Soil City, although he asked a lot about the celestial world, it was impossible for him to ask everything. However, he still knew the general framework. The biggest difference between the celestial world and the human world was that everyone could cultivate, regardless of whether they had the potential to cultivate or not. Even ordinary commoners could use the miraculous effects of immortal pills to lay a foundation for cultivation. However, the limitations of talent were often not something that ordinary immortal pills could overcome. Most commoners without the potential to cultivate would usually be stuck at the foundation establishment stage. Those families with a bit more wealth could often spend a lot of money to buy better immortal pills to forcefully increase their cultivation. It was even possible to break through to the tribulation passing stage, but it was difficult to go further. After all, talent was hard to surpass. Those with better cultivation talent were all recruited by the major sects, because after these people joined the sect, they had the chance to break through to the immortal realm with the help of immortal pills. In the celestial world, no sect would recruit disciples who had no chance to break through to the immortal realm. Disciples of major families with slightly less talent and limited prospects could still help the family do things, such as the various chambers of commerce. Without the backing of a major family, most of them would be like the people on this flying shuttle. Their cultivation was very awkward. They entered the soul formation stage, but couldn't break through to the small immortal stage, so they became rogue cultivators in the celestial world, relying on work to earn spirit stones to cultivate. In the celestial world, be it immortals or commoners, the currency used for transactions was spirit stones. There was no such thing as gold and silver. Overall, the situation in the celestial world was much better than in the human world. Even among the commoners, it was rare to find someone with a lifespan of less than 100 years, unless something unexpected happened. After all, there were more fights and killings in the celestial world than in the human world. After flying for nearly 2 days, Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He didn't know how big the celestial world was, but it was definitely many times bigger than the human world. With such a fast speed, if he were to fly in the human world, he probably wouldn't be able to count the number of laps he would have to fly around with 2 hands. But here he heard from others that it would take almost half a day to reach the outside of the ruins of God. The closer they got to the ruins of God, the more flying shuttles there were. At this time, there were 5 or 6 flying shuttles flying around Xitong at the same time. Everyone was sizing each other up with hostility. As for those who were flying faster, although they left later, They arrived first. With a shio sound they passed by them. Just as one passed by, with a shio sound, a stream of light flashed past, and another passed by. This kind of scene where the heroes of the world gathered in hundreds of airships, competed to be the first actually made Yu Qianqiu's blood boil. Only now did he realize that the human world was really too small. He had been a frog at the bottom of a well for so long. Yet he didn't know that this was the place where he could truly show off his abilities. Whether it was a hero or a man, it was a gathering of heroes to see. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath and suppressed the excitement in his heart. He elbowed Tao Zhong beside him and asked, "Old Tao, did Sitong offend them before? Why are they all looking at us like that?" Tao Zhong rolled his eyes at him. But these 2 days, he had already gotten used to this guy's ignorance. Always asking idiotic questions. He said in a low voice, "Sitong isn't even ranked in the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. How could they have offended so many people? If they had really offended so many people, they would have collapsed long ago. How could they have lasted until now? Everyone wants to enter the ruins of God, and in there all the rules are fake. Fighting, killing, and snatching things is a common occurrence. Everyone may look fine now, but once we enter the ruins of God, we will immediately become enemies. It's normal for them to look at us like this. Take a closer look, they look at others the same way." Hearing him say this, Yu Qianqiu looked around and found that it was true. He rubbed his chin and imagined, so in the ruins of God, fighting, killing, and snatching things was a common occurrence. This was a little interesting. The human world was too small, and it was his own territory, so it was not convenient for him to go all out. There seemed to be a lot of people in the immortal world. I haven't had a good time in a long time. I like it. After flying at high speed for almost 2.5 days, the flying shuttle's speed finally slowed down, and it was slowly descending. Yu Qianqiu quickly poked his head out to take a look. Below him was a vast granite mountain range that stretched as far as the eye could see. There was almost no greenery. There was a huge platform that was obviously man-made, and it was bustling with people. At this time, there were countless flying shuttles descending in the air, and there were even people in all kinds of clothes flying back and forth in the air. It was a busy scene. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up as he excitedly rubbed his palms together. He found that this place was even more *king lively than the large-scale exchanges in his previous life, and he was a person who liked crowds the most. He firmly believed that the more people there were, the more lively the place was, and that was the place to make a fortune. There were too many people below, so it was impossible to land. Mu Bing called for everyone to come down first, and then put away the flying shuttle in the air. After Nan Tianlong received the instructions, he left alone, and no one knew what he was going to do. Everyone floated in the air and waited. Yu Qianqiu was almost dazzled by the people below. His gaze landed on a huge stone mountain in the distance. At the foot of the mountain was a large cave with a diameter of tens of meters, and a large group of golden-clothed people were guarding the entrance of the cave. Yu Qianqiu's pupils constricted. The clothes of those golden-clothed people seemed to be the same as the envoy he had seen on the Immortal Ascension platform. Looking around, he discovered that there were many golden-clothed people scattered in the air, silently watching the scene below. Not long after, Nan Tianlong quickly flew back and cupped his hands towards Mu Bing. "Master, we found our stall, please follow me." Mu Bing nodded to everyone. The father and daughter pair led everyone to follow Nan Tianlong, and stopped at a relatively remote place. Although it was relatively remote, the flow of people was not small at all. There were many sheds set up below, and many more were still being built. Nan Tianlong flashed into the crowd below, and in a small open space between 2 sheds, he cupped his hands towards the surrounding people and shouted, "Everyone, please make way. This is the space allocated by our 4 Links Chamber of Commerce. We want to set up our stall, please do us the honor." The people at the side were quite cooperative, and immediately squeezed out of the small area and returned to the main road. Mu Bing quickly led everyone to the open space, and Nan Tianlong immediately took out a large amount of bamboo wood from his storage bracelet, preparing to set up the 4 Links Chamber of Commerce's stall. Chapter 805. Nan Tianlong, on the other hand, was a down-to-earth and hard-working person. He carried a large piece of wood and began to drive it into the ground. Suddenly someone muttered, "Why does our territory seem to be much smaller than theirs?" Everyone was taken aback and looked at the stall opposite them. It seemed to be a lot smaller. It seemed to be missing a third of the area. Mu Bing frowned and said, "Everyone paid the same amount of money, so it stands to reason that the size of the stall should be the same. This has always been the case. Tianlong, what's going on?" Nan Tianlong, who had just picked up a large piece of wood, was startled when he heard this. He threw away the things in his hands and scratched his head awkwardly. "Master, I'll go take a look." He strode to the crowded passageway, then glared at him, and walked towards the stall next door. Everyone looked at each other speechlessly, not knowing what was going on. At this moment, Nan Tianlong's angry roar suddenly came from next door. "Qi Fengsheng, hurry up and give up your spot. I paid the money. What right do you have to take our spot?" The flow of people on the temporary street suddenly stopped and looked over. Mu Bing and Mu Tianjiao's expressions changed greatly. They saw a slightly chubby man come out from next door, followed by two people. Nan Tianlong followed them angrily and kept shouting, "Qi Fengsheng, hurry up and give up your spot." The man called Qi Fengsheng did not even bother to pay attention to Nan Tianlong. He pinched the thin mustache on his lips and stared at Mu Bing with a teasing smile. "President Mu, there aren't many of you anyway. Why do you have to occupy such a large territory? No matter what, we come from the same place. We should help each other, don't you think so?" Mu Bing immediately shouted in a deep voice, "Qi Fengsheng, don't go too far. This is not a place for you to behave atrociously." A group of people immediately gathered on the street to watch the show. Qi Fengsheng's gaze turned cold. He glanced at Yu Qianqiu and the others and coldly snorted. "Mu Bing, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. If you behave yourself, you might be able to get back some of your capital. Otherwise, I guarantee that your people won't be able to enter the Divine Ruin realm." Everyone's expressions changed drastically. The other party was clearly telling everyone that after entering the Divine Ruin realm, they would attack the people of 8 Advancements Society and 4 Links Society. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Why did it feel like he had met a landlord tyrant? However, it was none of his business, and he was not familiar with the situation here. So he stood in the crowd and did not say anything. Mu Bing was furious, but Mu Tianjiao pulled him back. She looked at Qi Fengsheng with disdain and said indifferently, "Father, there's no reason to talk to this kind of person. Why bother talking to him?" After saying that, he leaped into the air and flew to the side of a golden-robed man in the air. He pointed down and said something, as if he was complaining. Qi Fengsheng calmly glanced at her and sneered, "Damn girl, you're so stubborn. One day, I'll make you strip naked and serve me honestly." The two men behind him suddenly snickered. Yu Qianqiu sighed slightly. It seemed that this guy had already straightened out his connections. Otherwise, he would not be so fearless. As he expected, the golden-robed man in the air glanced down coldly and nodded slightly at Qi Fengsheng. Instead, he reprimanded Mu Tianjiao. "Get out of my way. Don't interfere with my duty, otherwise I'll kill you." Qi Fengsheng immediately laughed and cupped his hands at the golden-robed man in the air to express his gratitude. Nan Tianlong immediately shouted, "Mother Ker, you've gone too far." Just as he was about to make a move, he was stopped by Mu Bing, who had an angry look on his face. Those golden-robed men were not people they could afford to offend. The people from 4 Links Society suddenly felt a little ashamed. Mu Tianjiao, who was in the air, instantly turned pale. Her petite and exquisite body became even more weak and helpless. The golden-robed man shouted again, "Get out of the way. Do you want me to make a move?" Mu Tianjiao slowly floated away and looked around with a pale face. Suddenly, she saw a group of golden-robed men flying over from afar. She immediately gritted her teeth and flew into the air to stop them. She bowed almost 90 degrees, cupped her fists, and did not get up. She did not say a word. In an instant, everyone below stared at the sky. Mu Bing and Nan Tianlong's expressions changed drastically. Qi Fengsheng's expression also changed. The golden-robed man who had reprimanded Mu Tianjiao before also had a change of expression. He quickly flashed over and shouted angrily, "How dare you? How dare you block the great commander's way? Get out of the way!" The dozen golden-robed men that were flying over had already stopped. Among them, a short-bearded man with a cold expression and a dignified aura waved at the golden-robed man. He then looked at Mu Tianjiao and asked calmly, "What's going on?" Mu Bing and Nan Tianlong quickly flew into the air, saluting the dignified man. Mu Bing said fearfully, "My daughter is ignorant. She shouldn't have offended the great commander. We will return immediately." He pulled Mu Tianjiao. Mu Tianjiao stubbornly shook off her father's hand and once again bowed to the dignified man. She then cupped her fists and said with grief and indignation, "So it's the great commander. I beg the great commander to uphold justice for my Four Links Chamber of Commerce." The great commander's gaze swept across the surroundings, indifferently saying, "Speak." "Thank you, great commander." Mu Tianjiao cupped her fists and reported, "Although my Four Links Chamber of Commerce is small, it is still a member of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. We also paid 50 million divine-grade spirit stones to the Immortal Palace to obtain the qualification to enter the Divine Ruin Realm, and obtained a small stall outside the Divine Ruin Realm. This little girl would like to ask the great commander, my Four Links Chamber of Commerce has paid the same amount of money, so why is the Immortal Palace's guard helping others divide my Four Links Chamber of Commerce's stall? If it's because my Four Links Chamber of Commerce paid the same amount of money, please tell us clearly. There is no need to humiliate us in public. My Four Links Chamber of Commerce will naturally give up our stall. We dare not go against the Immortal Palace. Great Commander, please tell us clearly." Qi Fengxing's face was deathly pale, and the golden-robed guard who reprimanded Mu Tianjiao was even paler. Mu Bing and Nan Tianlong were terrified, worried that their daughter had offended the great commander. Once the great commander was enraged, the consequences would be unimaginable. Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up. His evaluation of Mu Tianjiao rose by a notch. Her words were well-mannered and well-mannered. Unless the great commander ignored the Immortal Palace's reputation, he wouldn't make things difficult for Mu Tianjiao in public. "Which stall belongs to your Four Links Chamber of Commerce?" the great commander asked. Mu Tianjiao immediately waved her hand, pointing at the stall that was 1/3 smaller than the others. The great commander glanced at her, his gaze turning piercingly cold as he stared at the guard who colluded with Qi Fengxing, asking indifferently, "You're the one on duty here?" Yes. The guard was so scared that he couldn't speak clearly. The great commander said indifferently, "Do you have anything to explain?" "It was this subordinate's oversight. There were too many people, and I was too busy. Please forgive me, great commander." The guard was trembling in fear. The great commander nodded slightly. "I see. You can't be blamed. However, it seems that your abilities are limited, and you're no longer suitable to serve the Immortal Palace. Men cripple his cultivation and send him back to where he came from." "Great commander, forgive." The guard wanted to beg for mercy, but two people had already flashed out from behind the great commander. "Ah!" A miserable scream rang out. His golden robe was stripped off in the blink of an eye. His whole body turned limp, and he was carried away by another golden-robed man like a chick. The great commander's gaze turned to the shed that took up more space. One of the people behind him immediately pointed and shouted, "Which Chamber of Commerce does this belong to?" Qi Fengxing hurriedly rushed over trembling. He was so scared that he couldn't say a word. He only knew how to keep bowing. The great commander stared at him indifferently and said, "This is my fault for not disciplining my subordinates properly. However, you must immediately tear down that shed. Give up the extra space, and return it to the Four Links Chamber of Commerce immediately. Can you do that?" Yes. Qi Fengxing couldn't say anything else other than this one word. The great commander tilted his head slightly and said, "Send people to patrol the area. If such a situation is discovered again, deal with it as an example." "Yes." One of the people behind him immediately flashed away. The great commander's gaze swept over Mu Tianjiao, looking her up and down. Mu Tianjiao immediately bowed and said, Thank you, Great Commander, for your decision. When she straightened up, the Great Commander and his people were already far away. The matter was finally over. Mu Bing and Nan Tianlong were the first to let out a sigh of relief. The former pulled his daughter away and left. Qi Fengsheng also returned, trembling, and hurriedly ordered people to tear down the shed. Junior sister is still the best. I was scared out of my wits. Nan Tianlong immediately praised when he landed. Then he carried a wooden frame. He was the only one busy, and the people that the others called seemed somewhat indifferent. Mu Tianjiao glanced at everyone and bit her lip. After all, when they were hired, they didn't say that they were going to help Si Tong with chores, so she couldn't say anything. Mu Tianjiao tucked a lock of hair behind her ear, rolled up her sleeves, and carried a thick wooden pillar and got busy. Although this kind of work wasn't tiring with her cultivation, she was petite and delicate. Carrying a large wooden pillar and being a woman was indeed a tragic sight. Damn it! Yu Qianqiu was speechless. No matter how thick-skinned he was, he really couldn't be thick-skinned when it came to this kind of matter. Thus he ran over to help. Tao Zhong was startled, but he also followed. When the others saw that the two of them had started working, they couldn't just stand there and help. When Mu Tianjiao passed by Yu Qianqiu with a pile of bamboo sticks in her arms, she suddenly said softly, "Thank you." Yu Qianqiu turned around in surprise, and then waved his hand with a silly smile, indicating that it was no big deal. Everyone worked together, and very quickly, they built a bamboo shed in a short while. Inside the shed, a well-arranged display table was also set up, and all that was left was to display the items for sale. However, it seemed that Si Tong didn't have anything to sell at all, and the shed was empty. After the shed was built, the space inside suddenly became much smaller, and there was no way it could accommodate so many people. After greeting Mu Bing, everyone went out for a walk. Only Mu Bing, his daughter, and Nan Tianlong were left in the shed, discussing their funeral matters. At this moment, Qi Fengsheng strolled in with a sullen face. Chapter 806. Shuttling through the bustling crowd, Yu Qianqiu's eyes were fixed on Tao Zhong, asking him all sorts of questions without end. Tao Zhong was really sick and tired of it. He tried several times to shake off Yu Qianqiu, but he found that he couldn't do so no matter how hard he tried. There were several times when he thought he had shaken off Tao Zhong's tail, but he would inadvertently find this guy suddenly asking him questions from behind. Tao Zhong was on the verge of collapsing, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. Little did he know that it was precisely because Yu Qianqiu was familiar with him that he took the opportunity to pat Tao Zhong's shoulder, sacrificing a drop of blood essence to pat Tao Zhong's back. The main reason was to make it convenient for him to contact Tao Zhong, afraid that he would forget about Tao Zhong and not be able to find him. More importantly, if Tao Zhong had any questions, he could look for Tao Zhong at any time. Rows of sheds separated the streets, with people coming and going like the tide. Stalls were filled with things for sale, and there were also stalls like the Four Links Chamber of Commerce that had nothing on sale, waiting for the Divine Ruin Realm to come out. It was a little like waiting for the rice to be cooked. But wasn't the Four Links Chamber of Commerce just waiting for the rice to be cooked? On the large square, rows of sheds lined up. Yu Qianqiu roughly estimated that there were no less than 10,000 stalls. Immediately, he pulled Tao Zhong's sleeve, asking, "Does every stall here have to pay 50 million divine-grade spirit stones?" Tao Zhong reluctantly grunted in agreement, expressing his dissatisfaction. Yu Qianqiu looked at Tao Zhong with a strange expression, but immediately understood that he had troubled the other party too much, and the other party was clearly expressing his dissatisfaction. "This is easy, you'll be satisfied in no time." Yu Qianqiu glanced left and right, then dragged Tao Zhong to a shop diagonally opposite. Pointing at a storage bracelet wrapped around an iron rod, he asked the shopkeeper, "How much is this?" Tao Zhong replied coldly, "This thing is not cheap." The shopkeeper sized up the two people's attire. They didn't look like rich people, but he still smiled. 10 rooms, 1 divine-grade spirit stone for 1, no bargaining. Without a word, Yu Qianqiu took out a divine-grade spirit stone from his storage pouch, throwing it to the shopkeeper. "Take one." The shopkeeper caught the divine Great Spirit stone and was dazed for a moment, realizing that he had made a mistake. He immediately took out a storage bracelet, respectfully offering it with both hands. Please check. Yu Qianqiu received it and sent in his divine sense to inspect it. There was nothing wrong with it, so he turned around and stuffed it into Tao Zhong's hand. He smiled and said, I have been troubling Brother Tao for a long time. I have no way to repay you. Tao Zhong was already shocked by Huang's action of casually taking out a divine Great Spirit stone, Tao Zhong Yang, and said, seeing as he was, this I don't know how. With I Tao I can't accept. You're using a storage pouch. Tao Zhong was about to return the bracelet to Huang Xiaolong. In the immortal world, those below the immortal realm would rarely wear a storage bracelet, except for those big family's disciples. Itinerant cultivators like them from the immortal world would find it hard to earn 1,000 top-grade spirit stones in a year. However, Yu Qianqiu had given him a storage bracelet worth 10,000 top-grade spirit stones. How could he not be shocked? To him, this was indeed a heavy gift. It's just a bracelet, it's not as serious as you say. I'm just not used to wearing a lump of iron on my wrist. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand to reject Tao Zhong's gift. Although Huang Xiaolong said it casually, Tao Zhong still felt that the gift was too heavy, trying to reject it again. In the end, the shopkeeper chimed in. Since it's someone's kind intention, just accept it. This person doesn't look like someone who lacks money. Tao Zhong looked at the two people, a wry smile on his face. Then I'm sorry. After admiring the storage bracelet for a while, Tao Zhong wore it on his wrist, then cupped his fists at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand. Come, let's go, we'll continue our stroll. The shopkeeper quickly interjected. Honored guest, I still have a lot of good things here. Why don't you take a look? Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, declining the shopkeeper's offer. When the two of them reached the street again, Tao Zhong no longer tried to hide from Yu Qianqiu. Instead, he blindly followed behind Yu Qianqiu, ready to act as a guide at any time. This was called a method to take advantage of others, and it was a very realistic situation. Yu Qianqiu once again asked, Every shop here has to pay 50 million divine grade spirit stones? Tao Zhong immediately answered, That's right. Only those who pay the immortal palace are qualified to set up stalls and open shops here. As he spoke, he kept touching the storage bracelet on his wrist, afraid that he might accidentally drop it. Yu Qianqiu sucked in a breath of cold air. There were at least 10,000 shops here, and each shop had to pay 50 million divine grade spirit stones. Just from this alone, the immortal palace would earn at least a few 100 billion divine grade spirit stones. That old immortal emperor had struck it rich. This was the benefit of being a big boss. I heard that the sects and trading houses that enter the Divine Ruin Realm can earn a lot of money. Since the Divine Ruin Realm is controlled by the Immortal Palace, why don't they go treasure hunting themselves instead of letting others participate? Yu Qianqiu asked. Who says the Immortal Palace doesn't participate? Tao Zhong laughed. The Divine Ruin Realm only opens once every 100 years. The Immortal Palace naturally wouldn't give up such an opportunity. One must know that the deeper one goes into the Divine Ruin Realm, the more valuable treasures there will be. Although all the big sects and trading houses have spent money to participate, the cultivation of the people they send in is restricted, not allowing people above Immortal Realm to enter. Think about it. In the past countless years, every time the Divine Ruin Realm opened, the outer perimeter has been swept clean countless times. Where would there be anything valuable left? However, it's too dangerous to go deeper, and it's hard for people below Immortal Realm to enter. But the Immortal Palace itself is different. The people they send in won't be restricted by their cultivation. They can go deeper and find more precious and valuable things. Yu Qianqiu blinked for a moment. Then words came out of his mouth after a long while. Black, really black, too black. What's the difference between this and daylight robbery? Then he carefully looked around. There's no danger in talking about this topic, right? Tao Zhong shook his head. This topic has been discussed too many times. The Immortal Palace dares to do this. They aren't afraid of others talking behind their backs. They didn't force anyone, they just set a standard. who told everyone to rush in. Those who didn't get the qualifications to enter would be unhappy instead. It's all because of the monopoly. Yu Qianqiu shook his head speechlessly. When he passed by a shop called Skyward Palace, he paused. The shop's signboard read, "Buying in large quantities. Dragon scale grass. 1,000 divine grade spirit stones per stock. 100 head vine. 800 divine grade spirit stones per stock. Heavenly violet star. 400 divine grade spirit stones per stock." In short, there were a lot of things listed on the signboard, and none of them were sold for less than 1 divine grade spirit stone. Seeing the confusion on Huang Xiaolong's face, Tao Zhong immediately explained, "Skyward Palace is the largest alchemy sect in the immortal world. The prices listed here are the prices of items that are not lacking in the market. Some genuine top-grade immortal herbs are not listed here and are traded in private. Truly good things can go as high as hundreds of millions, billions, or even tens of billions of divine-grade spirit stones. For people like us at the bottom of society, we might not even be able to buy a stalk of dragon-scale grass, even after working hard for a lifetime." Poor. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. Only now did he realize that he had really overestimated himself. He thought he was very rich, but it turned out that his net worth couldn't even compare to a stalk of grass here. What the hell? This was really intolerable. This time he was really provoked. Secretly gritting his teeth, he turned around and asked with a smile, "These valuable things are in the Divine Ruin Realm?" Tao Zhong nodded. "Of course, otherwise the Skyward Palace wouldn't have hung a buying signboard here. It all depends on whether everyone has the ability to find them or not. For a small trading house like the Four Links, the reason why they did not hesitate to borrow money to enter the Divine Ruin Realm is because as long as they can find a stock of high-grade immortal herb, they will be able to recoup all the money they spent." Yu Qianqiu's heart skipped a beat, suddenly feeling that his chance to make a fortune had come. He couldn't help looking at the signboard a few more times, wanting to memorize all the valuable things listed on it. But with just one look he saw the problem. He suddenly realized that he didn't seem to recognize any of the grass listed on the signboard. Even if he entered the Divine Ruin Realm, he would most likely think that it was just a weed. Yu Qianqiu immediately coughed, turned around and asked, "Is there a shop here that sells all kinds of precious items?" "Of course there is. It's rare to see a day like this where all the sects and trading houses in the immortal world gather. It's a good time to do business." Tao Zhong waved his hand and pointed around. "There are only things you can't think of here, and there's nothing you can't buy, as long as you have the money. The various precious items you mentioned should be sold in the Wan Gutong's shop." Yu Qianqiu immediately waved his hand, indicating for him to lead the way. As they walked he asked, "What does Wan Gutong do?" Although Tao Zhong was surprised that he didn't even know about Wan Gutong, he was already used to his ignorance. He casually explained, "It's the largest auction and appraisal shop in the immortal world, and it's very rich." The two of them strolled along a few streets, asking many people before they finally found Wan Gutong's shop. As soon as the two of them walked in, a well-dressed, beautiful, and graceful woman walked out from the side of several old men. She walked over with a smile and asked, "Do you want to buy, see, appraise, or entrust something to be auctioned?" The dazzling array of items in the shop dazzled Yu Qianqiu, but he didn't recognize many of them. He paused for a moment and asked, "Are there any precious items?" "Yes." The beautiful woman took a few steps back, pointing at the piles of jade archives on the shelves at the side as she introduced, "Antiques, immortal records, medicinal pills, immortal herbs, immortal artifacts, beasts, and all kinds of rare ores and metals. What kind and grade do you need?" Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. "What do you mean by grade?" The beautiful woman was stunned by his question. Tao Zhong hurriedly raised his hand at the woman, gesturing for her to wait for a moment. He whispered into Yu Qianqiu's ear, "Items like these are usually protected with restrictions and can't be duplicated. Once duplicated, the information recorded inside will be destroyed. Usually, the price is set according to the rarity of the item. The rarer the item, the higher the price." Chapter 807. Yu Qianqiu made a no sound to indicate that he understood. Looking at the items on the shelf, he probed. How much would it cost if I buy all the items on the shelf? Tao Zhong turned his head and rolled his eyes. The beautiful and capable woman was taken aback, her gaze sweeping over Yu Qianqiu once more. Although she guessed that this person wouldn't be able to afford it, she still maintained a warm attitude and calculated the price of the whole set of items. She replied with a smile. If you want to buy all the items of different grades, it would cost a total of 274 pieces of divine grade spirit stones. If you are sincere, we can waive the small change, just 270,000 divine grade spirit stones. Do you need it? So expensive? Yu Qianqiu exclaimed, walking up to the shelf and casually picking up a piece. Imbuing it with his divine sense, he placed it back down with a frown on his face. Isn't it just some drawings and some words? How can it be so expensive? The beautiful woman felt awkward for a moment, but maintained her smile as she explained. The quality of this account's items is guaranteed. These illustrations are the work of this account's expert appraiser. The authenticity of the illustrations and the real thing are almost perfect. Just based on the variety of items, I dare say that there is no other account that can surpass this account. Furthermore, the description of each item is very detailed, so it's definitely worth it. Yu Qianqiu turned to look at Tao Zhong asking, is what she said true? Tao Zhong coughed lightly, awkwardly saying, Wang Gutong's reputation is unquestionable in the immortal world. Since she said so, it shouldn't be wrong. 270,000 divine grade spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his chin, muttering under his breath, as if he was thinking of something. A moment later, he turned to the smiling woman waiting for his reply. How many sets do you have here? The woman smiled politely and said, You can have as many as you want. Yu Qianqiu's eyebrows rose, asking again, You really can't copy them? The woman's expression stiffened, and she didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she said, Of course it can be copied, but this account has a special restriction on it. Only this account can copy it, outsiders can't copy it. To tell you the truth, this is also why I said that you can have as many as you want. Yu Qianqiu sighed with a little regret. It seemed that he would have to spend a lot this time. He waved his hand and said, Forget it, just give me 100 sets. The woman was stunned. Her alluring red lips moved slightly as she awkwardly smiled and said, Did you just say you want 100 sets? At this moment, the few old men who had not turned around all turned around and looked at Yu Qianqiu. Tao Zhong opened his mouth wide in disbelief. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, No more, no less. I want 100 sets. All right, is there a discount for buying a lot? The woman calmed down after confirming Huang Xiaolong's words. One look was enough to tell that she was someone who had seen the world. She smiled. One set will be 270,000 divine grade spirit stones. So 100 sets will be 27 million divine grade spirit stones. I'll take 25 million divine grade spirit stones from you. What do you think? Yu Qianqiu looked at the woman suspiciously. Even if Wang Gutong was filthy rich, this decision wasn't something an ordinary disciple could make, right? This woman wasn't simple. All right. Yu Qianqiu nodded his head, carefully observing the woman. Please wait a moment, I'll sort them out for you. The woman nodded and left, tidying up the jade archives on the shelf. The several old men also came over to help, and very soon, 100 sets of jade archives were sorted out. The woman even used a storage bag to store the jade archives, handing them over to Yu Qianqiu for inspection. Yu Qianqiu was merely checking if the number of jade archives was correct. He had no way of verifying it. However, he believed that since Wang Gutong was able to become the industry leader in the immortal world, she wouldn't resort to such underhanded means. Putting away the storage bag, Huang Xiaolong also took out a storage bag for himself, passing it to the woman. Count it. The woman quickly checked the number of divine grade spirit stones inside the storage bag. Smiling, 25 million divine grade spirit stones is correct. She turned around and passed the storage bag to one of the old men behind her. When she turned around again, she saw Yu Qianqiu walking out of the room. She immediately called out, Wait a moment. Yu Qianqiu turned around with a frown on his face. We've already cleared the transaction. Is there a problem? The woman quickly walked over to him, introducing herself with a smile. I'm Wan Ling. May I know how to address this honored guest? Did she take a liking to me because of my generosity? Yu Qianqiu thought it was impossible. If it was before, he wouldn't have dared to take out so many divine-grade spirit stones to spend, afraid it would be too conspicuous. But after strolling around the streets, he realized that spending several tens of millions of divine-grade spirit stones wasn't even enough to buy a blade of grass for a wealthy family. It couldn't be considered ostentatious. I'm just a customer who came and went in a hurry. There's no need to leave my name, right? Yu Qianqiu's brows were slightly furrowed. Wan Ling smiled, taking out a purple gold medal token, handing it over. My grandfather is the Wan Gutong sect's chief. This token is convenient for honored guests to have dealings with me. Within this Wan Gutong sect's business scope, if there's anything you need my help with, you can use this token to receive preferential treatment and the best service. Please accept this token. She really isn't an ordinary person. Yu Qianqiu was dazed for a moment. Seriously, this thing should be similar to the VIP card in his previous life. Perhaps he could use it in the future. Reaching out to receive the token, Huang Xiaolong studied it over and over again. There were only 3 simple words Wan Gutong engraved on it. Other than the special material used, there wasn't even a trace of extra pattern. But it was obvious that someone had spent a lot of effort on those 3 words, as they were carved with vivid and lifelike vines. Yu Qianqiu put away the token, cupping his fists in greeting. This one is Yu Qianqiu. I have some matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave here. The smile on Wan Ling's face grew wider, reaching out a hand. Take care, I won't send you off. Once the 2 of them left the shop, Tao Zhong didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Yu Qianqiu's wealth had truly shocked him. Only now did he realize that Yu Qianqiu was not on the same level as him. He was just a mere rogue cultivator, but Yu Qianqiu's background was unfathomable to him. But what he couldn't figure out was, since he was so rich, why would he participate in such a dangerous divine ruin stage general assembly? Tao Zhong rubbed the bracelet on his wrist, and connecting it to Yu Qianqiu's idiotic question, a guess immediately formed in his mind. He had a strong suspicion that this Yu Qianqiu must be some rich family's disciple, the kind that had just seen the world for the first time, and went out to gain experience. Several old men from the Wan Gutong shop approached Wan Ling, one of them asking, just a mere 20 million divine-grade spirit stones. Is it worth Miss giving out a profound violet token? Wan Ling smiled but did not reply. Another old man behind her chuckled. Maybe it's not worth it, maybe it's very worth it. I've never seen anyone buy so many illustrations at once, hee. Illustrations of rare and precious items. Who would spend so much money to buy this kind of thing? Either he has the real thing to compare it to, or there's something wrong with his brain. But did you notice a very special situation? The old man who spoke first was frowning in thought when Wan Ling turned around with a smile. Looking at his attire, it's obvious he's not up to standard, yet he could casually take out 20 million divine-grade spirit stones. Although 20 million divine-grade spirit stones is nothing to us, it's not something an ordinary person can take out. The contrast is too big. What puzzles me the most is that he doesn't seem to be familiar with our famous Wan Gutong shop. Also, I can't see through his cultivation. I wonder if the 3 elders can? The second old man nodded. This is the special situation I was talking about. Even with my late-stage Great Immortal Realm cultivation, I can't see through his cultivation. Could it be that he's an early immortal emperor? In the immortal world, which early immortal emperor isn't famous? But I've never seen him before. Isn't this strange? The other 2 elders exchanged a glance. It was obvious from their expressions that they didn't pay much attention. The first old man spoke solemnly. Maybe he took some kind of immortal pill to conceal his cultivation? I hope so. Otherwise it's too strange. Wan Ling pondered for a moment. Suddenly, the distant sound of a bugle horn came from outside, sharp enough to pierce one's eardrums. Wan Ling raised her head to look at the crowd flying away from the street, her expression solemn. The godly ruin realm is finally open. Let's go take a look. It'll also boost the confidence of our Wangutong disciples." The three old men nodded, and as she walked out of the shop, the shopkeeper who had been hiding outside immediately came in. When the bugle horn sounded, Yu Qianqiu and Tao Zhong had just returned to Si Tong's shop. Not long after, the other hired people also squeezed in one after another. It seemed like they had all been startled back by the sound of the bugle horn. Everyone excitedly and nervously talked about the opening of the godly ruin realm. Not long after, the crowd on the street outside completely disappeared. Mu Bing stood inside without any reaction. Everyone looked at each other in dismay, feeling that it was a little strange. Yu Qianqiu was in a hurry to go in. He couldn't help but ask, "President Mu, are we not going into the godly ruin realm?" Mu Tianjiao, who was beside Mu Bing, looked at the crowd and smiled. The godly ruin realm's spiritual energy is very abundant, and it only opens once every 100 years. Who knows what kind of heavenly treasures have grown? Right now is the time when everyone is fighting and robbing, and also when the casualties are the highest. Moreover, it's very crowded right now. It'll take at least half a day for hundreds of thousands of people to go in. We're not in a hurry, we'll go in half a day. Everyone suddenly understood. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "Thank you, miss, for understanding us." Mu Tianjiao smiled and shook her head. At this time Mu Bing, who had his back facing the crowd, slowly turned around and bowed to the crowd with a solemn expression. "This time, my daughter will also be entering the godly ruin realm with everyone. I hope everyone can help take care of her." Nan Tianlong, whose thick brows were knitted together, also bowed to the crowd. Everyone looked at each other speechlessly, wondering if this Mu Bing had gone crazy over money, to actually be willing to put his own daughter in danger. In truth, Yu Qianqiu quite admired Mu Tianjiao, and didn't want anything to happen to her. He couldn't help but frown and say, "President Mu, why do you have to do this?" Entering depends entirely on luck, and you don't expect your daughter to be able to pick up something good. You'd better reconsider. Some things can't be retrieved once they're lost. Chapter 808. A hint of bitterness appeared on Mu Bing's face, but he did not refute anything. Instead, it was Mu Tianjiao who stood up with her chest out and cupped her fists towards the crowd. She smiled sweetly and decisively. "Everyone has misunderstood my father. My father has been trying to stop me from entering the divine ruin realm, but my four links chamber of commerce is already swaying in the wind and rain. As my father's only daughter, how can I sit back and do nothing? For me to wait outside the ruins of God for a month without doing anything, I really can't do it. I hope everyone will work together with me to save my four links chamber of commerce from this crisis." Mu Tianjiao thanks everyone in advance. As she spoke, she bowed deeply. Everyone looked at each other and sighed in their hearts. It was Mu Tianjiao's misfortune to be born in the four links chamber of commerce, but the four links chamber of commerce with Mu Tianjiao was a great blessing. Yu Qianqiu could not help but let out a sigh in his heart. A daughter should be like Mu Tianjiao. She was much better than her father. A few miles away from the square, under a huge stone mountain, was a dark cave with a diameter of dozens of meters. White mist was rising from it, lingering outside the cave. A thick and majestic ancient aura was pulsating in and out, shocking everyone outside the cave. Then, the white mist shrank and gathered inside the cave, blooming with a white stream of light and spinning. The hundreds of thousands of people outside stared intently at this scene, until the white light in the cave stabilized. "It's open, it's open!" The crowd burst into excited cheers. The divine ruin realm had finally opened, and everyone's eyes were burning with excitement. Outside the cave were thousands of golden-robed men, each of them looking around vigilantly, keeping the hundreds of thousands of people away from the cave entrance. The stone mountain was also filled with thousands of golden-robed men, watching below. The external affairs commander of the immortal palace, Wu Xiong, stood behind the thousands of golden-robed men, quietly standing beside the cave entrance with his hands behind his back. His cold gaze swept over the hundreds of thousands of people from the various sects and chambers of commerce. He was the commander who had helped Mu Tianjiao out of trouble before. At this moment, The hundreds of thousands of people all stared at the side of the mountain. They saw a team of 100 golden-robed men walking neatly from the side. They lined up in front of Wu Xiong and knelt on one knee, saying, "Greetings, Commander." Wu Xiong nodded slightly and said indifferently, "Let's begin." The 100 people all stood up. The leader waved his hand at them and signaled for them to set off. He took the lead and flew into the swirling white light in the cave. The others also followed him without hesitation. Then, a person walked out from behind Wu Xiong and waved his arm forward. The thousands of golden-robed men immediately changed their formation, forming of one group of 100, of each group of 100, and immediately separated dozens of paths. The hundreds of thousands of people gathered outside immediately surged and slowly moved forward. The immortal of the hundreds of thousands of people had. Of the rules of. For a time, people from the various sects and merchant guilds could be seen passing through the golden-robed guards and rushing into the cave. As for the situation behind the cave, no one knew. However, everyone could imagine how cruel the bloody competition was, because every time the Divine Ruin Realm opened, out of the hundreds of thousands of people who entered, less than 100,000 would return. Some sects and chambers of commerce would send 30 disciples in, but only 1 or 2 would come back alive. Some unlucky ones might not even make it back alive. That would be a huge loss. But those disciples who could come back alive and make great contributions to the sect would not have to worry about living for the rest of their lives. Then again, if there was a heavy reward, there would definitely be brave men. If there was no heavy reward, who would risk their lives? After more than half a day, the hundreds of thousands of people had finally entered. Instead, tens of thousands of elders from various sects had gathered in the sky. They were all nervously staring at the scene below. They would be waiting here for a month, and their respective stalls would be their lodgings. 1 month later, whether the sect would be happy or sad would depend on whether their disciples lived up to expectations. Those who lived up to expectations would be able to display many rare items in their own stalls to sell, while the unlucky ones would either have to spend money to buy things or pack up and leave. The Four Links Chamber of Commerce was the last to arrive. When the people from the various sects and chambers of commerce had all left, they walked up to the golden-robed guards for inspection. Many people in the sky felt strange looking at this group of people. There were only 31 people in total, and 2 of them clearly had cultivation that exceeded the limit, while the last one's cultivation couldn't be seen through. Excluding these 3 people, there were only 28 people participating. For this kind of thing, everyone hoped that the more people that went in, the better it would be. Perhaps the extra person that came out would be able to collect precious items worth hundreds of millions, or even hundreds of billions of divine-grade spirit stones. At the very least, the more people that went in, the more likely there would be 1 more person that would come back alive, and at least bring something out. No one had ever seen such a situation before, and they couldn't figure out what the Four Links Chamber of Commerce was up to. Some people who had dealings with the Four Links Chamber of Commerce knew the predicament they were in, shaking their heads and sighing. As for Qi Fengsheng, who had a deep understanding of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce, he was sneering at the side. Wan Ling and the 3 elders exchanged a glance, noticing that Yu Qianqiu was standing at the end of the group, walking at the back of the group in a well-behaved manner. However, his head kept darting left and right, as if he was curious about everything. It was not easy for someone like him to be able to stand at the end of a group of several 100,000 people. Being the only one among several 100,000 people was quite eye-catching. However, the most eye-catching thing was yet to come. 2 golden-robed guards suddenly raised their hands and shouted, "Stop right there. You're not allowed to go in," cutting off Yu Qianqiu's little tail from the outside. Everyone's gazes were fixed on him. Yu Qianqiu was isolated outside, dumbfounded as he looked around. Facing the group of golden-robed guards that were glaring at him like tigers watching their prey, he swallowed hard and said, "Why if they can go in, why can't I go in?" One of the golden-robed guards snorted coldly, "There's no why. Leave now." Mu Bing hurried over with Nan Tianlong, bowing and explaining, "You may have misunderstood. His cultivation is only at the soul formation stage. He's only like this because he took an immortal pill that conceals his cultivation. That's your business. There's no need to explain it to me. The golden-robed guard shouted. Leave now, or you'll be killed. Mu Bing couldn't hold back after hearing such harsh words. Mu Tianjiao, who had already passed the inspection, quickly ran back. She bowed to the golden-robed guard and begged, Big brother, please do me a favor. He really is only at the soul formation stage. You can check him. Commander Wu Xiong, who was standing at the entrance of the cave, had no interest in this kind of thing. His subordinates naturally had their reasons for doing this, but when his gaze landed on Mu Tianjiao, he paused slightly. In a flash, he teleported to their side and asked indifferently, What's going on? After the group of people bowed, both sides explained the reason. Wu Xiong glanced at the small group of people and was somewhat curious. He stared at Mu Tianjiao and asked, Why are there fewer people? Mu Tianjiao immediately bowed and said, Reporting to Commander, our Chamber of Commerce is in a difficult time. We really can't gather enough people. Other than my daughter, they were all recruited by our Chamber of Commerce. We're already very lucky to be able to recruit so many people. Wu Xiong had been in the celestial world for so many years, so of course he knew about ups and downs. He could roughly guess what was going on. He asked indifferently, You want to enter the Divine Ruin realm yourself? Yes. Mu Tianjiao replied respectfully. We really don't have enough people. Wu Xiong didn't ask any more questions. He made an exception and put his hand on Yu Qianchou's shoulder. He discovered that Yu Qianchou's body was indeed filled with white true essence, not golden celestial essence. He didn't say the result himself. He said indifferently to the two guards, Check his cultivation. Yes. The two guards responded and immediately put a hand on Yu Qianchou's shoulder. Then they withdrew their hands and replied, Late-stage soul formation cultivation. Wu Xiong nodded and said, Late-stage soul formation cultivation entering the Divine Ruin realm isn't against the rules, right? One of them immediately reported, Since it's been confirmed, it's not against the rules. Without another word, Wu Xiong waved his hand and said, Let them pass. At the same time, he disappeared in a flash, not even giving Mu Tianjiao and the others a chance to thank him. After some twists and turns, under Mu Tianjiao's lead, the group of 28 people finally entered the Divine Ruin realm. Wan Ling and the three elders looked at each other speechlessly after witnessing this scene. They didn't expect that Yu Qianchou had really taken an immortal pill to conceal his cultivation. What they didn't expect even more was that Yu Qianchou would actually enter such a dangerous place like the Divine Ruin realm. The mystery of buying 100 sets of illustrations made them even more confused. Could it be to bring them into the Divine Ruin realm for comparison? But they didn't even have 30 people, so what did they need 100 sets for? As soon as Yu Qianchou and the others entered the circling white light, they immediately felt as if they were in a starry sky. There were colorful streams of light flying around them, and there was a huge suction force in front of them that made them involuntarily pass through. In just a few moments, everyone felt their eyes light up. A huge force spat them out from the darkness of the flowing light. As soon as they stood firm, they immediately found that the exit was also a cave, and there was also a rotating white light behind them. This was also the entrance to go back. After a month, it would automatically disappear, and they could go back at any time within a month. However, once they went out, they would lose the chance to come back. The people of the Immortal Palace would not let them in again. However, no one would go back before the time limit was up. The consequences of going out midway were very serious. The sects would never be lenient to people who were afraid of death and brought shame to their sections. Of course, if they brought back a great treasure, that was another matter. Because that was called protecting a treasure meritorious. Everyone had already taken out their own treasures and walked out vigilantly. Yu Qianchou walked out empty-handed. His treasures could appear at any time, so it was easier to use them empty-handed. As soon as everyone walked out of the cave, they were immediately shocked. What they saw was a bloody scene of corpses strewn all over the ground. Chapter 809. As far as the eye could see, everything was dark and gloomy, as if it was raining and the sun couldn't be seen. The naked eye couldn't see very far, only a few hundred meters away. However, within this area, there were broken limbs and intestines spilling out. The blood on the ground had yet to coagulate, and was still flowing slowly. It was obvious that the fierce battle was about to end. Countless people had died with their eyes wide open. Roughly estimating, thousands of people had died within this area of a few hundred meters. No wonder it was said that the fight for treasures was the most intense when they first entered. Often, because of the appearance of a single immortal herb, everyone would gather and fight over it. The hazy mist was obviously condensed from spiritual energy. Just breathing it in was enough to refresh one's mind, but the thick smell of blood in the air made it hard for people to breathe freely. The group was glad that they were the last to enter. Although they might have lost the chance to obtain the precious treasure, they had avoided heavy casualties. Everyone here had seen the world, and death was a common occurrence. The tragic scene in front of them shocked them, but there was nothing to be afraid of. Mu Tianjiao's beautiful hair had long been tied into a tight knot. In one hand, she held a small silver-white shield engraved with various patterns of flowers. In the other she held a sword. Judging from the gleaming luster on the sword, they were no ordinary items. It's best that we don't split up. However, in case we get separated by an accident, everyone must remember the way back. After Mu Tianjiao's sincere explanation, a resolute expression flashed across her face as she warned, "But I'll say the ugly words first. According to the previous agreement, if you withdraw without obtaining any valuable treasures, I, Si Tong, will not pay a single spirit stone." No one said anything. Most of them were vigilant of their surroundings. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and rummaged through a pile of jade archives and illustrations from his storage pouch. After arranging them in a convenient order, he put them back into his storage pouch. He kept 2 of the immortal herbs in his hand, ready to compare them with the real thing. He had no choice. Unlike everyone else, they were all natives of the immortal realm. Even if they hadn't seen many things before, they had at least heard of them. With one look, they could tell what they should pick and what they shouldn't. However, when they saw that he didn't take out any transcendent artifacts, but instead took out 2 jade archives, they became curious. Only Tao Zhong turned his head to the side speechlessly. "You're a second-generation rich kid. What are you doing here? Is this a place for you to play?" Mu Tianjiao asked suspiciously. "Yu Qianqiu, don't you have any Dharma treasures?" Yu Qianqiu raised his head and let out an ah. When he came back to his senses, he casually took out a flying sword from his sleeve. With a flash of cold light, it went back into his sleeve. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They were all interested in his sleeve, and couldn't help but take a few more glances. Seeing that he was prepared, Mu Tianjiao nodded slightly, waved the shield in her hand and said, "Let's go." The group flew up lightly, passing by the bloody corpses, not daring to fly too high. After flying out of this wretched land of intense slaughter, he landed on the ground and walked again. Because everyone was here to look for treasures, the line of sight here was not good. If they flew too high, they would definitely miss something. While everyone was vigilant of their surroundings, they were also searching for something. Yu Qianqiu could be said to be the most proactive one. He held 2 jade archives in his hands, his eyes darting around as he ran at the very front. If he found any suspicious plants, he would immediately take out the jade archives and quickly compare them. The others could not understand what he was doing, but Mu Tianjiao was a little touched by his initiative. Tao Zhong was the only one who scolded him in his heart. A second-generation rich kid. Their surroundings were always covered in fog formed by dense spiritual energy. If they were to cultivate here, they might even be able to save on spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu was even wondering if he should bring the Utopia army here for training. Perhaps it was because they were shrouded in spirit fog for a long period of time and never saw sunlight. But the plants in the ruins of God looked a little strange. They were mostly different from the plants commonly seen outside. This brought great trouble to Yu Qianqiu's search. He could barely walk far, and he would have to stop for a moment when he encountered a strange plant. However, the benefits it brought were also great. It did not take long for him to be able to eliminate some things without looking at the jade archives. The entire terrain of the ruins of God seemed to be made up of hills. Tall mountains were rarely seen, perhaps because they had not yet ventured deep into the ruins. It was also probably related to the lack of sunlight. There were very few tall trees in the surroundings. This was a good thing for the treasure hunters, as they did not have as much cover. Along the way, they occasionally saw traces of fighting. There were ferocious beasts that had been killed, as well as the corpses of those who had been killed in battle. The storage bags and storage bracelets on their bodies were nowhere to be seen. It was obvious that they had been taken by their opponents. After hundreds of thousands of people swept through the area, it was indeed very safe. Even the wild beasts were probably scared out of their wits, let alone the ferocious beasts. Although Yu Qianqiu and the others were the last to enter, they did not come out empty-handed. They found quite a number of immortal herbs along the way. Although they were not very valuable, they would pick them as long as they passed by. Because the reward given by the four-way sect was 1/10 of the estimated value of the items they found, every item they collected was equivalent to an additional reward. This made Yu Qianqiu admire Mu Tianjiao's methods. She made everyone feel like they were shareholders in his previous life, working hard with the mentality that the more they earned, the more they would get. However, Yu Qianqiu was not interested in this small amount of money. He couldn't even be bothered to look at the low-grade jade archives, with the highest value being one divine-grade spirit stone. In his hand were mid-grade and high-grade jade archives, with the lowest value of one divine-grade spirit stone, with the highest value reaching hundreds of billions of divine-grade spirit stones. Currently, everyone was still in the outer region of the ruins of God. It would be very difficult for Huang Xiaolong to find mid-grade and high-grade immortal herbs. Everyone had more or less harvested their harvest, but he did not even touch a single stalk. Not to mention Mu Tianjiao. Even everyone else was a little unhappy, because once they went out, he, Yu Qianqiu, would have to take a share of everyone's hard-earned harvest. How could he just split the money and not do any work? Who knew that before everyone could complain, Yu Qianqiu would be the first to do so? He who was walking at the front suddenly stopped, turning around and shouting at the crowd. Following behind others like this is not a solution. There really isn't anything valuable here. Even if there was, it would have been swept clean by the hundreds of thousands of people ahead of us. Why don't we just fly forward, go deeper inside and make a fortune? What do you guys think? Everyone exchanged a look, hesitating. Going deeper inside was indeed possible, but there were definitely too many people here. Even if they came across something good, they would have to fight to snatch it. The risk was too high. If they dragged on for another day or two, many people would die, and the danger would be greatly reduced. At that time, it wouldn't be too late to plot again. Mu Tianjiao pondered in silence. In truth, her thoughts were more or less the same as everyone else. She indeed wanted to drag on for another day or two. Seeing that no one spoke, Yu Qianqiu waved his arm, shouting, "What's there to be afraid of? The timid will starve to death, the bold will die from overeating. It's impossible to make a fortune without taking risks. Everyone be straightforward, are we going or not?" Someone couldn't stand it, mistaking him for someone slacking off and mocking. "Since you don't work and keep wandering around, why don't you go deeper and explore the situation first?" Mu Tianjiao still wanted to stop them, telling everyone not to cause trouble that was detrimental to unity. Unexpectedly, Yu Qianqiu slapped his thigh and laughed. "Good idea. You guys take your time to search, I'll go scout out the situation first, then come back to look for you guys. It's settled then." With that said, he disappeared into the spirit fog with a whoosh. Mu Tianjiao wanted to stop him, but she didn't have time. The group of people were speechless, realizing that this guy was really bold, actually daring to go in alone. Yu Qianqiu flew inside quickly with a face full of excitement. He had long wanted to leave the group and act alone. Otherwise, if he encountered something good, it would be inconvenient to take it for himself. And if he was forced to kill his own people to snatch the treasure, how embarrassing would that be? Just as he was fantasizing that he had picked up a treasure worth hundreds of billions, suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the air. and dozens of streams of light formed a matrix, sealing off his path forward and retreat, rapidly shooting towards him. If it was someone else who encountered this, they would probably be in danger, because they had lost the space to teleport through and dodge. F***ck. You're courting death. Yu Qianqiu was instantly enraged. He hadn't found anyone to fight since he came in, but someone actually ambushed him. It was really intolerable. With a wave of his arms, he used the metal incantation, and in an instant, dozens of flying swords that attacked him exploded into silver powder with a hum. At the same time that he attacked, Yu Qianqiu quickly passed through the silver powder that filled the air and shot in the direction of the attack. Along the way, he was afraid that the person who ambushed him would escape, so he disappeared with a teleport, directly appearing in the forest below. The 30 people lying in ambush in the forest were prepared to secretly attack and steal the treasure. Before entering the Divine Ruin realm, they had already secretly trained in a group attack in the sect for a long time. This was the first time that they had found someone alone, and the first time they attacked as a group. Who knew that after the flying swords were released, they would suddenly lose contact with everyone. The 30 people were looking at each other in dismay when they suddenly realized that there was one more person among them, and they were immediately shocked. Before they could react, the other party had already shaken his arms and shouted angrily, "Star-absorbing great technique." Everyone only saw a burst of white smoke in front of them, and they instantly lost consciousness. F***ck. I am number 1 in the world below the immortal realm. How dare you sneak attack me? You must be tired of living. Yu Qianqiu cursed and crushed a skeleton, taking the storage bags from the waists of the 30 skeletons into his hands. Carrying a large pile of storage bags, his mood immediately became better. He leaned against a tree and happily checked the storage bags one by one, but the more he looked, the darker his face became. He didn't find anything valuable. After confiscating all the storage bags, he rushed out of the forest with a whoosh. He didn't know which sect the 30 skeletons on the ground belonged to, but they were all destroyed in the blink of an eye. He didn't know how the elders of the sect who were waiting outside the divine ruins would react when they found out, and he didn't know how the sect who had secretly trained them in a joint attack would react when they found out. Chapter 8:10. To Yu Qianqiu, killing these people did not burden him in the slightest. Entering this place to fight and kill was a matter of life and death. Success or failure was up to the heavens. Moreover, these people were the ones who made the first move. He had not flown far from the place where he had killed people when he faintly heard the sounds of an intense battle. It sounded like a group of people were fighting. Yu Qianqiu immediately slowed down and arrived outside a valley. He quietly floated close to the ground and hid behind a large boulder. He peeked his head out to take a look. By the time he saw what was happening, the intense battle was almost over. He saw with his own eyes one of the people being dismembered by a group of swords. There were other corpses scattered all over the valley. Another surrounded gray-robed man suddenly summoned something from his storage bangle. He grabbed it in his hand and shouted angrily, "Stop, or I'll destroy it." The dozen or so blue-robed men surrounding him immediately hesitated. Their flying swords hovered in the air, glaring at the gray-robed man. However, none of them dared to make another move. After exchanging glances, one of them stepped forward and said with a cold smile, "Hand it over, and I promise to let you live." "Do you think I'll believe your bullshit?" the gray-robed man said with a face full of grief and indignation. The leader of the blue-robed men scoffed. "What do you want then? If you destroy the thing, you'll still die. Hand it over, and I promise to let you go." The gray-robed man shook his head in grief and indignation. He knew full well what would happen to him if he handed over the thing. However, as luck would have it, he happened to see a head peeping from behind a large boulder outside the valley. Needless to say, it was Yu Qianqiu. The gray-robed man immediately shouted at Yu Qianqiu, "Brother, if you can save my life, I'm willing to give you 1 yuan of the Tri-Element's divine fruit." "Damn it! Don't drag me down with you, you bastard!" Yu Qianqiu cursed under his breath, and immediately retracted his head. However, he seemed to have heard the name Tri-Element's divine fruit somewhere before. He immediately took out the jade archive and checked it. The dozen or so blue-robed men looked over but saw no one. The leader immediately laughed and said, "Do you think we're 3-year-olds? You're still trying to create a diversion at this point? I advise you to obediently hand over the item, and I promise to let you go." However, the gray-clothed man was unwilling to give up. He shouted again, "Brother, do you think it's too little? All right, as long as you can save my life, I'm willing to give you 2 essences of the 3 elements immortal fruit. If you can help me kill all of them, and take revenge, I can give you all of the 3 elements immortal fruits." Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding behind the boulder, turned a deaf ear to him. He was waving his fists excitedly in the air. He had finally found the description of the 3 elements immortal fruit in the intermediate level illustrated handbook. This 3 elements immortal fruit was not simple. It had miraculous effects, and was one of the 3 main ingredients of the Immortal Ascension Pill. What was the Immortal Ascension Pill? When one's cultivation base reached the peak of late divine transformation stage, consuming this immortal pill would allow one's cultivation base to rise to early minor immortal stage. The Immortal Ascension Pill was just right for Yu Qianqiu. He was at the peak of the soul-severing final stage, and was just a step away from breaking through to the minor immortal early stage. Don't underestimate this one step. Even in the immortal world, there were many people who couldn't take this step. Of course, reaching the early minor immortal stage didn't mean that one could forge an immortal physique. But as long as one's cultivation reached this level, forging an immortal physique wasn't a difficult task for people in the immortal world. All they needed to do was spend some money to borrow the passage from the Immortal Palace. Any one of the 72 passages from the immortal world to the mortal world would do. Even though the Immortal Ascension Pill was nothing to most cultivators in the immortal world, it was a priceless treasure for those who were stuck in the soul-severing stage for their entire lives. Especially those rich and powerful families in the immortal world, they would spend large sums of money to purchase it. One had to know that although the lifespan of a soul-severing cultivator was long, it wasn't immortality. Once one stepped into the immortal realm and forged an immortal physique, one would be able to live forever. Just imagine how tempting this was. Hence, the price of the Immortal Ascension Pill had always been high in the immortal world. One Immortal Ascension Pill could be sold for 1 billion divine grade spirit stones, and it could be even higher. As for the main ingredient, the 3 elements immortal fruit, even if it wasn't refined into an immortal pill, it could still be sold for 300 million divine grade spirit stones. How could Yu Qianqiu not be excited? The gray-robed man raising the price once again immediately attracted the attention of the group of blue-robed men. The leader of the group raised his chin at his fellow disciple, then turned to look at him in disappointment. The latter immediately dashed over. Hiding behind a boulder, Yu Qianqiu had just put away the jade archive, and made up his mind to snatch the treasure when he raised his head, and saw a blue-robed man appear in front of him. Before he could react, the flying sword in the blue-robed man's hand was already flying towards him. With a wave of his left hand, Yu Qianqiu smashed the flying sword into dust. His right hand formed a claw as he used the absorbing star's great art. The instant white smoke rose from the blue-robed man's body. Huang Xiaolong had already rushed over and smashed the blue-robed man into pieces. As the white smoke dissipated, Yu Qianqiu appeared. Standing at the valley's exit, he slowly turned around to face the group of blue-robed men. Such a shocking entrance method immediately shocked the group of blue-clothed people. They didn't see the scene of Yu Qianqiu smashing the flying sword behind the rock, but they saw the scene of their fellow disciple being smashed into pieces by the opponent's palm. His fellow disciple didn't even have the time to scream before he died. The group of blue-robed men looked at Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, but none of them could see through it. They exchanged looks and saw the fear in each other's eyes. The leader of the group even exclaimed, "You're an immortal expert. How did you enter the divine ruin realm?" Yu Qianqiu wanted this kind of shocking effect. Although the absorbing star's great art was powerful, he did not want to casually show it in front of outsiders. This was because this move was a trump card no matter where he went. It had to be used conservatively, so he still used it to confuse them. You've got some guts. I didn't want to interfere in your matters, but you actually dared to attack me first. You're really tired of living. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly as he slowly walked into the valley. The gray-robed man was overjoyed. He looked around, and while the others were not paying attention, he teleported behind Yu Qianqiu to hide. At this moment, the leader of the blue-robed men shouted, "Run!" He was the first to teleport far away into the air, and then quickly flew away. The others also ran away at almost the same time. Yu Qianqiu was startled. The distance was a little far. He wanted to get closer and use his qi to lock onto them, then use the absorbing star's great art to finish them all off, and strive to leave no one alive. Who would have thought that the other party would run away without even thinking? He had thought that his shocking entrance would scare them into not daring to move, but they still ran away. He was only at the soul formation stage, so it was impossible for him to catch up to them one by one. "Thank you for saving my life, senior." The gray-robed man's voice sounded from behind him. Yu Qianqiu turned around and glared at him coldly. He was a little displeased. If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid of damaging the treasures in this guy's hands, he would have killed him a long time ago. The gray-robed man shuddered in the face of his cold gaze, and he offered the three-element divine fruits with both hands. "In order to thank Senior for saving my life, I am willing to offer all of the three-element divine fruits to you, Senior." On the tip of a foot-long dark green sawtooth grass, 3 quail egg-sized bright red fruits were growing. The fruits were faintly glowing with a thin layer of red light. A strange fragrance that could make one's heart melt slowly drifted out from the hands of the man in gray. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. It was exactly the same as what was recorded in the handbook. He reached out to grab it, took a look, and sniffed it before stuffing it into his storage pouch. He then looked at the gray-robed man, who didn't dare to stand up straight, and asked, "You wouldn't give it to them even if you died, so why are you giving it to me?" The gray-robed man said respectfully, "They killed my fellow sect brothers, so I naturally can't give it to them. Besides, even if I give it to them, they won't let me go. Senior saved my life, so I am willing to give the treasures to Senior." He only said this to save his life. Otherwise, who would be willing to give up their treasures? Yu Qianqiu was naturally aware of this. He nodded and asked, "Which sect are you from?" The gray-robed man replied honestly, "Junior is Shui Mingqing, a disciple of the Skyward Palace." The Skyward Palace? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The Skyward Palace, the #1 alchemy sect in the celestial realm? That's right. Shui Mingqing raised his head and said, "Could it be that Senior knows the elders of my sect?" Yu Qianqiu shook his head, but he put on a smiling expression and asked, "Since you're a disciple of the Skyward Palace, I'm sure you know a lot of alchemy recipes for refining immortal pills. For example, using this 3 elements immortal fruit to refine the immortal ascension pill." Although his expression became amiable, Shui Mingqing felt a chill down his spine. It was as if he had seen a dagger hidden in a smile. He immediately waved his hand and said, "Junior is just an external affairs disciple. Our sect's disciples haven't reached the celestial realm, so they don't have the chance to come into contact with alchemy. So Junior doesn't know any alchemy recipes." Yu Qianqiu snorted and said with a cold smile, "You're clearly lying to me. As a disciple of the Skyward Palace, how can you not know anything about alchemy?" Shui Mingqing hurriedly explained, "Senior may not know this, but before the cultivation of our Skyward Palace's disciples reaches the celestial realm, apart from cultivation, the main thing is to learn how to recognize various kinds of immortal herbs and be familiar with the medicinal properties of various immortal herbs and pills. Only after reaching the celestial realm will they have the opportunity to come into contact with the basic alchemy methods of refining immortal pills. As their cultivation increases, it's possible to come into contact with higher-level alchemy recipes. This rule of our sect is not a secret in the celestial realm, and many people know about it." "Senior, why?" He didn't finish his sentence, but Yu Qianqiu was not a fool. Naturally, he knew what he wanted to say, but now he believed that what he said was true. After a pause, his eyebrows suddenly moved as if he remembered something. He coughed and said, "Since you said you're familiar with the medicinal properties of various kinds of immortal herbs and pills, I'd like to test you. Do you know about the limit-breaking pill?" "Yes," Shui Mingqing replied confidently. "The limit-breaking pill is transparent white. Ordinary cultivators with spirit stones can increase their cultivation by one level every time they take one, and they can't increase anymore when they reach the end of the tribulation passing stage. There are actually two other colors of the limit-breaking pill. One is purple, and the other is red. Actually, both of them are poisonous pills." Chapter 8:11. Shui Mingqing spoke tirelessly, clearly explaining the pros and cons of the limit-breaking pill. His explanation was even clearer than Yu Qianqiu's understanding from the Pill Formula Jade archive. He even thoroughly analyzed the medicinal principles of the limit-breaking pill. This greatly amazed Yu Qianqiu. The Skyward Palace was indeed worthy of being the leader of the industry in the immortal realm. It had already formed a fairly complete cultivation system. Its disciples had already laid a solid foundation before they even came into contact with alchemy. Once they officially started in the future, they would be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort. Sure enough, the methods accumulated over the years were not something that the cultivation sects in the mortal world could compare with. "Then let me test you again. Is there any way to get rid of the toxins that have seeped into the body after taking the limit-breaking pill?" Yu Qianqiu asked with a smile, his hands behind his back. He really did have the air of an old pedant testing his students. Shui Mingqing's face was filled with doubt. He did not know why this senior would ask such a simple question. Even if these questions were not known to everyone in the immortal realm, they were not secrets, were they? Yu Qianqiu urged with a smile. "It doesn't matter. Don't worry and say it boldly." Shui Mingqing paused for a moment, then continued to reply respectfully. "The toxins of the real limit-breaking pill are relatively mild. Generally, cultivators can rely on their own cultivation to self-regulate and eliminate the toxins within a month. But the limit-breaking pill is different. It is very harmful to the cultivator's body. The more they take, the more toxins will seep into their limbs, bones, and meridians. In severe cases, they will die suddenly, but in light cases, their cultivation will not progress. In fact, many people in the immortal realm use the limit-breaking pill to forcibly increase their cultivation. But for the famous sects, this method of spoiling things through excessive enthusiasm is generally not used. At first glance, it can quickly form a batch of power in a short period of time. But in the long run, even if the golden marrow cleansing pill is used to get rid of the toxins in the body, it will also cause congenital damage to the meridians in the limbs and bones, resulting in acquired deficiencies. This will bring great confusion to future cultivation. Since ancient times, almost none of the cultivators who have taken the limit-breaking pill have been able to increase their cultivation above the great immortal realm, unless there is another elixir to remedy it. So for the famous sects, they generally do not use methods like spoiling things through excessive enthusiasm, like the limit-breaking pill, because for them they care more about long-term benefits. Only when there are more strong cultivators in the sect can the benefits of the sect last longer. That makes sense. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and asked, "The marrow-cleansing golden pill you mentioned is the thing that can remove the poison from the limit-breaking pill, right?" "Exactly." Shui Mingqing couldn't help but ask. "With senior's cultivation, you shouldn't need the marrow-washing golden pill, right? Senior, do you have someone who has taken the limit-breaking pill?" "Smart. To think that you would be able to guess that." Yu Qianqiu laughed out. And pill. And is it expensive?" Shui Mingqing really wanted to take a closer look at what kind of person this person was. Why did he keep asking this question that everyone knew about? However, he did not dare to be presumptuous. After all, with this person's cultivation base, he could kill Shui Mingqing at any time. Thus, without any complaints, he replied obediently, "Actually, the demand is still very high because there are many people who have used pills similar to the restriction-breaking pill. However, in terms of unit price, whether it was high or not depended on who it was for. On average, each marrow-cleansing golden marrow pellet cost around 2,000 divine-grade spirit stones. It was a huge sum to the average person, but it was nothing to the big sects and families. In fact, the golden marrow-cleansing pellet's cost price wasn't high at all. The main reason why it could be sold for 2,000 divine-grade spirit stones was because of the high demand, not to mention that immortal herbs had a certain growth cycle. No matter how common an immortal herb was, it couldn't be as common as weeds. It wasn't worth it to use other treasures to grow it. This explanation was very detailed. Yu Qianqiu looked at the other person in admiration, but he was calculating in his heart. There were close to 10,000 people in Utopia's army, including some people who did odd jobs. There were more than 10,000 people. These were all his subordinates, and he could not leave them alone. Moreover, when he came to the immortal world to conquer the world, it was more reassuring to use his own people. After all, he had spent a lot of effort to train them day by day. 10,000 marrow-cleansing golden marrow pellets were only 20 million divine-grade spirit stones. He could still afford this amount of money. Even if he could not afford it, he had to think of a way to do so. From the time he sat on the flying shuttle to look at the vast immortal world, to the gathering of heroes outside the ruins of God, his blood was already boiling. A very grand idea was born in his heart. It was too boring for those cultivators in the cultivation world to fight over such a small territory in the human world. As the #1 expert in the human world, he had the responsibility and obligation to bring everyone out to see the world. If everyone had the ability to follow my orders, then follow me to the immortal world to fight for it. From that moment on, he had the intention to use Utopia as the core and establish the cultivation world in the human world as his headquarters. Then he would bring everyone to the immortal world to develop. He believed that those experts who were famous in the human world were not petty people. Once they went to the immortal world and saw the world, they would not be interested in the benefits of the human world. Not to mention forging an immortal body, just the spirit stones here could be counted as divine grade. Who would still want to disturb the secular world? In this way, his wish to separate the cultivation world from the secular world would naturally come true. Yu Qianqiu pondered for a moment and suddenly asked, "Just now, you said that there are pills similar to the limit-breaking pill. Then, are there pills that can raise one's cultivation from the tribulation passing stage to the soul formation late stage?" "Yes," Shui Mingqing said with certainty. "It is said that as long as the main ingredient for refining the limit-breaking pill remains the same, and a few other immortal herbs are added, it can be refined into the limit-breaking pill. But the side effect of this pill is that the toxicity is too strong. Once you break through to the soul formation late stage, and don't take the marrow-cleansing golden pill in time, you will immediately die. Even so, you must break through to the small immortal stage within 3 months, and forge an immortal body. Otherwise, your body will gradually weaken, and you will quickly age and die within 3 months." "The toxicity is so strong?" Yu Qianqiu was shocked and asked, "Are you sure you didn't make a mistake?" Shui Mingqing raised his head and looked at him seriously and said, "Senior, you can ask others. There should be many people in the immortal world who know about this. But generally, no one will take the limit-breaking pill. It should be known that it is impossible to break through from the soul formation late stage to the small immortal stage within 3 months. Only those who have the immortal ascension pill would dare to do so. But one immortal ascension pill is worth 1 billion divine-grade spirit stones. It is not a small amount for ordinary sections. Using this method to raise one's cultivation level is simply using a huge amount of spirit stones. Not many people can afford it. Plus, using the limit-breaking pill to raise one's cultivation level has a huge impact on the future, so very few people use it." Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Putting everything else aside, one immortal ascension pill was worth 1 billion divine-grade spirit stones. If he raised the cultivation level of all the people in Utopia to the small immortal stage, it would be an astronomical figure. Even the wealthy immortal palace would not be able to afford it. After a moment of shock, he calmed down. As long as he could find the various immortal herbs to refine the pill in the ruins of God, with the help of the purple chaos in Utopia, it would not be a problem to cultivate a large number of immortal herbs. The real problem was in the refining. With the pill refining recipe he could make a living in the mortal world, but it was obviously not good enough in the immortal world. But then again, as long as he could control a large number of rare immortal herbs, he would not have to worry about not being able to earn money in the immortal world. At the same time, he would not have to spend so much money. The most important problem now was to find the rare immortal herbs to cultivate, and then the problem of refining. As for finding rare spirit herbs, he had planned to do so before entering the ruins of God. But to find someone to refine the pill, Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin and looked at Shui Mingqing greedily. He had already set his sights on the #1 alchemist sect in the immortal world, Skyward Palace. Looking at the clothes of the corpses scattered in the valley, Yu Qianqiu sighed meaningfully. It seems that among the 30 people from Skyward Palace who came in, you are the only one who is lucky enough to be alive. What are your plans for the future? Shui Mingqing's face darkened when he heard this. He slowly shook his head and said, "If I can find a valuable treasure in return, it will be a great contribution. If I go back empty-handed, I'm afraid my cultivation will come to an end." Yu Qianqiu suddenly chuckled and said, "Even if you have a valuable treasure in your hands, do you think you can leave the ruins of God by yourself? I'm afraid there are already people lying in ambush at the exit of the ruins of God, waiting for a lone person like you to walk right into the trap." Shui Mingqing was immediately stunned on the spot. After a moment of absent-mindedness, he suddenly raised his head and bowed. "Senior's cultivation is profound. Please show me a way out." He was not stupid. After he reacted, he immediately guessed that Yu Qianqiu must have a purpose for saying this. Otherwise, with the other party's cultivation, there was no need for him to pay attention to him. Talking to smart people is really enjoyable. You understand with just a hint. Yu Qianqiu scanned the entire valley and said slowly, "I won't hide it from you. After we go out, I will have to deal with your sect. When the time comes, you can introduce me to them. Secondly, you will follow me for this month. When we go out together a month later, I will give you a rare treasure that you can take out, so that you can explain to your sect. Of course, during this month, you will also have to display your specialty and help me lead the team to find all kinds of rare immortal herbs. What do you think?" Shui Mingqing was overjoyed. With the other party's ability, it should not be a problem to protect him. Moreover, there was no need for the other party to lie to him. He was such a burden in this dangerous area. He immediately bowed and said, "Junior will follow Senior's arrangements." As he said this, he looked around and was stunned. "Senior wants me to lead the team? May I know where Senior's men are?" You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.